Yeah, you were trucking along, and then all of a sudden we hear, "Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
So sorry.
no.
All right. How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the pilot episode of the Living Legends podcast. This is, like I said, our pilot episode, and we're going to let's go over the docket real quick here. So we're going to talk about who we have in this podcast. We're going to talk about what you should expect going forward in the podcast, as well as our Pro Tour experiences, maybe some thoughts, and some community questions. And I use the word some for community questions a little loosely because we have a lot of questions. But before we get to that, let's introduce the people in the podcast. My name is Kel, also known as Red Zone Rogue, and I am joined by both Bill from the Spike Feeders and Az, and I'll let them introduce themselves. I'm not sure what order, so let's go Az first, because he's the first on the thing that I'm looking at.
I was
Also
going to say we
alphabetically,
could
it
do
just makes
we
sense.
could roll. We could roll for see who goes first.
Yeah. High roll odds.
Have you got dice there, Bill?
I do. I mostly have coins. Aha, here we go. I have a binary D6. Let's go.
All right, let's go. Rolling off. Can you hear that? Can you hear that?
A little bit.
I've got a 1. Brilliant.
I got a. So this is a 32, but again, it's binary, so that is like 4 or something. So it's more than
There we
4.
are.
Yeah, Azalea player rolling a 1. Good start.
Absolutely.
At least it wasn't KO, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so I guess by the grace of the RNG gods, I will go first. My name is Bill. I am from the Spike Feeders. I am one of the 3 hosts of the Living Legends podcast, and I am a big fan of Flesh and Blood. I think my specialty right now, in terms of just like where a lot of my experience comes from, is growing local communities. And I say that specifically not because I want to like pump myself up or anything, but one of the questions that I noticed that I really did want to talk about was about growing local communities, and I feel like I've helped to grow my local community here in Winnipeg pretty instrumentally, pretty substantially. So I like the game as like a social aspect, and also just from a very competitive aspect. Like the flow of the game is something that just absolutely intrigues me. Yeah, I'm very excited to be able to chat with the kind folks here on the show and share my thoughts with everybody in the community at large. And I think the Living Legends podcast, as we'll be talking about in a bit, will be your one-stop shop for absolutely everything that's going on a week-to-week basis in the world of Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then I'll throw it over to Az. Introduce yourself, my good sir.
Cheers. Yeah. So I'm Az from Go Again Gaming, and I'm from the United Kingdom, across the pond from these guys. And yeah, I got into Flesh and Blood about a year or so ago, and I just fell in love really with like the character side of it, the identifying with certain heroes in the game, and just all the lore that's already there. And you know, I love the casual aspect of it. I liked Commander. I liked identifying with a certain character. And I think that really, really comes across in this game. And I'm an advocate for casual play, commoner, UPF, as you've probably come to see on all of our channels. But yeah, just absolutely love the game and can't wait to speak about all aspects of the game rather than just the competitive side of it, just all aspects of the game you can come to expect on this podcast. So very, very happy to be here. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. And you guys both touched upon it. So what the Living Legends podcast is a weekly Flesh and Blood podcast where myself, Az, and Bill talk about all aspects of the Flesh and Blood trading card game. Everything from lore to strategy to news to products, just all aspects of Flesh and Blood. I think we want this podcast to be for everyone, right? So if you are a brand new player, this podcast is for you. If you are a longtime player, this podcast is for you. If you're just here for the lore and the characters, well, this podcast is for you as well. And I think that's just kind of like the idea here. I was thinking about the name Living Legends, and another word for legends is like stories, right? And so we want to tell like the living stories of the world of Rathe and Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, like
exactly.
report on things as they're happening, as they're contemporary. and just talk about it like as a whole. And something that I think is really cool is that we do have as like as he mentioned, he likes the the casual aspect, the community aspect, the social aspect. I'm sort of in the middle of the two, where I do really like the community aspect, but I also love just how the game functions as a competitive thing. And then we have Kel, who is literally a commentator for tournaments.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I touch upon all of them. I think of myself a little bit more on the casual side, even though I do, Pro Tour coverage and stuff. We'll talk about that later in this episode. But I like to think of myself.
None of us are actually like top 8 contenders, at least not right now.
Right.
But I think we're going to be at least touching on every single aspect of it.
Yeah, I can maybe hold my own with Pro Tour competitors. I'm not sure about top 8 competitors, but I'm all right. So that's kind of the gist of the podcast. We don't have all the nuts and bolts here. I'm not sure what day this is going to come out every single week. We're going to shoot for Monday, but that's a non-promise, tentative Monday. And you probably also noticed already that at least currently this is a audio-only podcast. The YouTube version will have some images and whatever, but this is typically just an audio-only podcast. And I will have links in the description where you can find the podcast. Once again, not 100% sure at the time of the recording, but I'll figure that all out by the time this goes live. So unless you have anything else to say, do you want to jump into our first topic of this pilot episode?
I'd love to.
Yeah, so the first topic is just going to be the Pro Tour. It's the most recent big thing that happened, and it was probably one of the biggest things that's happened to Flesh and Blood so far. Definitely the biggest event, and it was very, very exciting. And I'm actually really curious to hear your guys' perspectives, because mine was like very much entrenched in a very specific spot in the Pro Tour, right? I got out and about a little bit, but most of my time was spent like in the coverage booth. But yeah, I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Would y'all like me to start first, or would you want to just jump in?
Well, you were there, so you give us the lowdown first of all, and then we can just go off you.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll give you the quick and dirty, because I could probably talk for a long time for this. I made a whole video, like a 40-minute video, kind of going over my experiences. But in case you haven't watched that. And even if you did, let's just talk about it a little bit. So the Pro Tour was fantastic. Honestly, in my opinion, just to sum it up, if you want the TLDR, I don't think it could have gone better in a lot of respects. Day 1 or day 0, I guess if you want to call it, we had a players' banquet where all the Pro Tour competitors were invited to it. Free food, just got to kind of like mingle, chat with folks. The banquet did open up to the general public a couple hours into it, and there was a Q&A with James White that Matt DeMarco, also known as Flake, did. I think it was fantastic. James talked about a lot of different things, everything from the secret 4th hero in Uprising, spoilers, there's not really going to be a secret 4th hero, to some spicy details of how the draft might work. James is like, the draft is going to work well, even though we do have 2 Draconic and 1 Ice hero. He mentioned something like that there's going to be a card similar to Cracked Bauble, but you can attack with it. So take that for what you will. I have a feeling that we'll see the Cracked Bauble become opened, like uncracked. We'll have an uncracked Bauble, and what's inside will allow us to attack. That's my like tinfoil hat, but I think it's to smooth out the draft because of the way that the talents are balanced. So that's super interesting. Then we also had just the actual Pro Tour. Day 1, there was a lot of people. Day 2, it was even more insane because we had the calling. I have a short little story where like I had to go to the restroom, right? And so I ran to the back bathroom, and there's like a line to the door. And I'm like, all right. So I ran to the front bathroom. There's a line to the door. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to my hotel. I just ran back to my hotel to use the restroom because it was like so packed, which is very good for the optics of the game. We can maybe talk about this a little bit later, but it was so packed that it sold out, like the calling sold out. There was literally not enough seats. Like they had a number of seats and they sold that many like tickets to it. They basically just maxed out. So I was talking to one of the Chris's from LSS. There's a lot of Chris's that work at LSS. And we were talking about how it's a good and bad thing. They think it's more a good thing, and I think I'd agree. You know, it's bad that the people who didn't have the foresight to sign up ahead of time, they didn't get to play. But it's also a good thing in that so many people wanted to play Flesh and Blood that they weren't, like, there just wasn't enough space. Like, the game is growing so much that the venue was just not big enough for the demand, which is just really good optics for the game. Like, when you talk about that, you'd be like, your event sold out, like the calling sold out. So there's that. And artists were there, Federico Muzzetti and Steve Argyle, both fantastic guys. I got to chat with them both at decent length. And I very much enjoyed meeting them, getting signatures, having them ruin my cold foil cards by signing all over them. Absolutely loved it. Very happy to do that. Got Steve to sign over my $800 cold foil Viscerai, and I could not be happier. And what else? I also got to see Federico outside of the event because he was in the same hotel as me, which was kind of cool. Just being like, hey, man. And he just kind of came over, we chatted a little bit. And then Flake started talking Italian out of nowhere. And I'm like, what? You speak Italian? I'm like,
is there anything he can't
do?
do?
How many languages do you speak, man? He also speaks like fluent French. And he speaks like Polish. And he speaks like a bunch of languages. I was very impressed. He just started speaking Italian.
A talented man. Can this just be? Can we just transition this from Flesh and Blood to just be a podcast about Flake? Like,
Flake's a great guy. Really looking forward to
Flake Out
Part later.
Podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe an idea for a future guest. But it was just a great time. Like, overall, it was just a celebration of Flesh and Blood. Lots of high level play. Obviously, we had the Pro Tour. It was basically, I was telling folks, this is kind of like what we'll see at Worlds, right? Everyone here at the Pro Tour, for the most part, with some notable exceptions, these are the people who are going to be competing at Worlds, and so this is just like the peak of the Flesh and Blood competition, and it was awesome to watch the matches. There's some amazing feature matches, and watching Yuki Lee Bender play out. I think she's one of the best players in the world, definitely one of the best Ranger players in the world. Watching the Kanos just kind of pop off, like Alexander Vor and Sasha Markovic. It was just a fantastic time. It was incredibly tiring and exhausting, but I loved it. Loved every moment of it. So that's kind of my sort of quick rundown of the Pro Tour. There's a couple small things. Like, I didn't really get a chance to talk to James. I talked a lot to the other LSS guys, but James White was like so slammed the whole weekend. I got to see him like 3 times for a total of like 40 seconds. And there was a couple times where like I had a chance and I'd go out and there'd be a huge line, but people just wanting to talk with James. And someone said like I should just since I'm working the event I should just kind of like cut. And I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna cut the line and just be like look down the line. Sorry guys, sorry bro.
Sorry, it's me, Kel from Red Zone Rogue.
There's no way I'm doing that for multiple reasons. But like me meeting James isn't any more important than anyone else meeting James. That's why everyone's here. And so like there's no way I would deprive someone else the opportunity. So it's just like it just didn't work out that I didn't really get to talk to him much. But for a future event, that's something I'll be looking forward to for sure. That's probably my biggest regret. I got all the other LSS members to sign a playmat and it doesn't have James, so it's like this incomplete playmat. But yeah, I'm actually curious to hear what you guys thought about the Pro Tour and your experiences with it and all that kind of stuff. If let me pick Bill.
I didn't get a chance to actually watch a lot of the coverage of it, unfortunately. Just life got in the way, but I was very impressed to see that our Discord, our Flesh and Blood section of our Discord, was absolutely popping off. Because we have so many people that are really engaged in the high level play of Flesh and Blood. We have a couple of local players that absolutely adore Kano and Wizard in general. And it's the only thing they play in Blitz, and they've tried it in CC, and they're like, well, like it's like the ceiling is way higher because you have 3 of each card, but it's just not as consistent and blah blah blah. So the fact that there were 2 Kanos that made their way into the top 8, they were just like you couldn't stop them. Like they were so pumped about it.
Do you know how many Kanos are on the tournament total?
7? 7?
Yeah. So
yeah, the turnover was crazy high.
Insane.
Like 2 out of 7 total is ridiculous.
That's what you call breaking the format. When 7 people roll in with a deck and it has a 2 out of 7 turnover to the top 8, that's insane.
Yeah.
Well, it was like which one was it? The Calling Las Vegas, where Tyler Horspool ended up winning against I forget the other guy's name, unfortunately.
It was the Chain. I don't remember either.
Yeah, but that was a phenomenal game, and I'm very disappointed that I can't remember the second place, because he was also playing his heart out. It was crazy. But I remember in the top 8 there was a dash, and I think it was one of like 2. There was like a 50% conversion to top 8.
Yeah. Oh, I think that was Alberto. Was Alberto the guy who got?
Alberto Miracle? Is his last name Miracle?
It might be. If it is Alberto, he was local here. Great person.
Yeah. But like that was cool. That sort of thing, when you see the dark horses end up in the top 8, is just, you can't help but feel hyped about that.
Yeah.
Like it, especially against the sea of Starvos. Like, as much as I don't have like actual negative feelings about the deck, because it is just a deck, whatever. Like is it a little bit overtuned? Sure. But the way that I look at it, outside of things like the Pro Tour and at the top level of play, the thing that I like about Flesh and Blood is that even if you're not playing at that super high level of play, you can kind of have a shot with almost anything. And that's how I prefer to play it, where it's like, you know, I play decks that I think are strong and fun to play at the same time. I could play a deck that's objectively super strong, but then it like starts to feel bad. Like, I don't know. Especially the first ever PTQ that sorry, what was that?
Just to dot our T's and cross our I's, I found the people. It was Sebastiano was playing.
Oh, okay.
And then it was Alberto Miracle on Dash. So Sebastiano was playing Chain, Alberto Dash. Just to make sure.
No, that's perfect. That's I'm really, really happy to be able to give them the credit where it's due, because they did, again, all of them in the top 8 there played absolutely phenomenally, and I was with Alberto that whole time in my heart. I wanted him to take it, but yeah, the first ever big event that I judged was the first big event where Starvo was a legal hero, and the amount of feel bads that I saw from people on both sides of the table when their opponent was at like 4 life or something, and they're like, oh, beginning a turn, reveal to Starvo, and both of them are just like, yeah, I win. Like, like you can only do that so many times before like I would feel bad enough to not play the deck anymore, just because of that. Like, I'm not saying that anybody who plays the deck should feel bad. Like, that's absolutely not what I'm trying to say. But you know, when you get to play these other decks, like obviously Pablo was all in on Chain here, knowing that Starvo was going to be the main deck to beat. He was all in on it, and he did it. Like, he took it home, and that's phenomenal.
Pablo's story is like super. It's awesome. Like, he went 0-2 day 1. Like, he lost his first 2 matches, and then he came back to win the whole thing. That is such a tale of like perseverance and like not tilting. Like, so many people would have just tilted from that, right? So 0-2 at the Pro Tour, immediately tilt, being like, oh, I can't win, can't get in. No, dude, he went for it, and he ended up winning the whole thing. So
yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, he started 0-2 and then finished 11-3. Like, that is just like, that's a bloodbath.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, good, like fantastic job on his part. And yeah, as my like, unfortunately the Kanos didn't make it as far as they at least my locals would have loved them to. The fact that they hit top 8 at all is still like, it's a testament to, you know, if you really, really like a deck and you know it in and out, you can play it at a super high level thing, even if it's not technically like the best deck, like, or the, you know, the mathematically optimal deck, I'll say.
Right. Yeah.
You know, again, my sort of point of view on this is, obviously I'm not a professional player at all, but the minds out there that can sort of decipher what is going on with the metagame obviously saw a chink in the armor here to play Kano, because it was on the pie chart. It says 1.9% of decks were Kano decks, 37% were Bravo decks, or Starvo decks. So they must have seen something where I think it was the lack of arcane barrier was one of the main points that they
100%.
just thought, yeah, I can prey upon this, and even if I get dominated Okanolded, I'm going to discard my cards. That's fine. My turn ends on my turn, but your turn is my turn anyway, so I can cast my spells on your turn anyway, whether I've discarded my cards or not. So I think, the fact that people that were playing Kano figured that out, I think is a testament to how strong this game is and how you can sort of meta against it, similar to how the Prism player did against Chain, even though I wasn't watching at that time. So yeah, I that's what I really, really loved about it, seeing that happen.
Yeah, 100%. I was talking to I think it was Brian Gottlieb, and we were saying like we don't think, and I agree, we don't think Kano is the best deck in Flesh and Blood, but we think it was the best deck for that tournament, just because they absolutely got the meta call, and it was I mean, even though they didn't get there in the end, I still think it was like a fantastic medical. Like the conversion rate was nuts, like we talked about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it's just crazy. It really does go to show you that, and this is, I think, something that we also want to touch on. I think all three of us sort of share the same thing, and one of the questions from Twitter was on this topic. But you don't necessarily have to play the most expensive deck. Like, I'm not going to be commenting on the lists themselves, because obviously at a Pro Tour level you are going to be playing the most expensive thing, but you could pare this down to a little bit more of a like a smaller viewpoint and say, just because you don't play the Starvo deck because you don't have the expensive legendaries for it, if you know the deck and you know the matchup and you prepare accordingly, you can meta your way into wins that you shouldn't have had otherwise, just because you understand the matchup or the game that much more than your opponent does. Like preparation and like just overall game knowledge is so invaluable in Flesh and Blood. And again, like we're going to be saying this a lot, but there's so much depth to Flesh and Blood in general that like it doesn't begin and end with how much you're willing to spend on the game. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you're right. There are some questions on Twitter that talk about that. If you guys are done talking about the Pro Tour, we can jump into those questions, because there's a lot of them.
Let's go.
All right, cool. So I'm just gonna kind of read these from the bottom, and there's a good number, good dozen or so here. So I'm just gonna read through them all. So let's do this. The first one,
particular order.
the first one just says, I would ask how both you, I guess me, and Az get your hair to look so great, but there's also a more important part to this question too. But let's answer that one first. Az, your hair routine.
So sometimes to get the volume of the hair, I don't wash it every day. I use Batiste sort of dry shampoo to give it that extra zhuzh.
All right.
But,
I respect the zhuzh.
The Batiste zhuzh. I honestly, I struggle with mine more as I get older and my hair starts to thin. It used to be much thicker. But I don't know. This is going to sound really bad, but my partner is like a manager at like a local Whole Foods type place, and I just ask her, I'm like, hey, can you just buy me whatever shampoo? And so she'll pick up shampoo, or if I'm there, I'm like, I don't know what to get, which is a good one, and she'll just point to one, and I'm like, okay, I'll buy that one. There's like, I don't know, like sea salt and stuff in it. I don't know, man. Like, I just use what she tells me to.
Just get a bit of table salt in the hair. Just gives it a bit of extra volume.
Yeah. Get that the pink Himalayan salt. Just kind of slowly grind it.
Grind it.
Also, side effect of that, kills leeches if you have that issue at all. That's just something that I know from being a Boy Scout when I was younger.
Good point.
Also, I wasn't included in the question, so I just had to insert myself.
That must be why I've never gotten leeches.
Exactly.
Mollusks in general just die to salt, don't they? So I think you're okay there.
Okay. All right. So the second part. Second part of the question. Uh, slightly more serious. They'd like to ask how we think LSS could further improve the Ranger class. It's one of their favorites, but I still feel like it could be expanded upon in a very fun and unique way. And this is by Sin Briar Enthusiast at Sin on Stream. I forgot to name it at the start, but I will continue. I will shout out the questionnaires.
Cool. Yeah. I know you've probably got a lot of thoughts on this, Kel, because I remember speaking to you about it before.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm actually of mind right now is like they could print absolutely disgusting busted things, and I don't think it would make Ranger like overpowered at all. Like,
Yeah.
Lexi's pretty good, and actually I think Lexi is in a good spot for the non-Starvo meta. I think Lexi's going to be quite good going into this. I say non-Starvo meta because Starvo hit Living Legend at the Pro Tour. We didn't really talk about this, but Starvo actually won the calling. So after this ProQuest season, Starvo will hit Living Legend and no longer be available for Classic Constructed play. Now, at the same time, we have a new set coming out, Uprising, so it's going to be really, really hard to see how the meta shakes out. But regardless of Uprising, if you don't count those heroes, Lexi's in a good spot. I mean, Ranger always has like you just call it the Ranger tax, right? You just have to pay the extra Ranger tax by virtue of using a bow. And it not only limits like you resource-wise, but it also limits you in terms of the number of attacks you can play, the number of arrows you can play. Voltaire is like the most popular one because it lets you use it twice and also, lets you go a little bit wide, giving those arrows go again. And I think that's one of the biggest detriments to the class. It's also one of the coolest flavor things for the class, being able to load your bow and fire it off. It's really fun, but it's also one of the things that really holds it back, in my opinion. And I know a lot of folks would like, a more stable weapon, like an offhand dagger, chest piece quiver, just something that they can use at a whim if they whiff. Because we've seen this on stream. We've seen this on stream at like the highest level in nationals, the U.S. Nationals in Orlando. I think is Isaac from the Attack Action podcast. He had a commanding lead, and I was doing coverage, and I'm like, he has such a commanding lead. The only way he doesn't win is if he whiffs entirely on the 3 of a kind, and then he whiffed on the 3 of a kind, and had to just pass the turn.
That game, that turn specifically, is etched into my soul as a core memory.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
It hurt me so bad. As somebody who, like, I was watching that game like my life depended on it. I was so pumped to see Lexi, specifically Ice Lexi, at this top level. And in that game, you're absolutely right. He had a commanding lead. I was like, I think how I described it was like his foot was on Briar's throat the entire game.
Yeah.
Like, consistently had frostbites, consistently taxed cards out of their hand. Like, it was almost embarrassing. Everybody that was in our Discord chat was like, there's no way Lexi doesn't win this. And then, cast 3 of a kind, passes the turn.
Oh, it's so
and that was it. Like, that one misstep.
I distinctly remember saying it on stream, on coverage. I was like, well, I'm not saying the game is over, but... And then he just whiffs, and it crushed my soul. Yeah.
And like the absolute worst part of that is there's nothing that he could have done as a player differently to like make sure that worked properly. Because if I remember correctly, he fired it off with no arrows in hand and then drew no arrows.
Yep.
So it's like there's no agency there. There's no decision making that he could have done where it's like, oh, well, if I had done this instead of this. Like, no, it's just straight up the deck decided it didn't want to win, so you didn't.
Yeah. Should have just drawn arrows. But what do you guys think about improving the Ranger class? I know you both have thoughts about this.
I think Az is probably chomping at the bit. I think he came prepared with a lot of thoughts. Yeah. So I'll defer to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I'll plug a video I did for 5 design ideas for Ranger and Azalea in general, because I think there's loads of things that could be done, but I think, as you say, Kel, like if 3 of a kind said draw 3 cards, go again, Ranger would still be in the same place. It doesn't matter whether they have to play cards from Arsenal or not. I think they would still be in the same place. I think it's that inherent downside of having to play cards from from your arsenal, and only if you control a bow. I think that's one of the main things that holds them back. But yeah, I think for thematic purposes, I think Ranger should be more like how Batman is. You know, he's not going in. He's not. If you think of a Ranger, they're firing arrows to hit the opponent. They don't want to miss. And I think they should have more sort of traps, more sort of baiting and goading the opponent, and having every time the opponent attacks a ranger, they have to make a decision as to why they should what they could run into by attacking that ranger. Because if you imagine Rhinar running towards the ranger who's actually waiting to shoot them in the face, it doesn't make any sense. Why, from a thematic perspective, but yeah, I think there's loads of things that could be done, but I don't know what specifically really.
I like that a lot. Just again, like the thing that drew me to Azalea right off the hop, which Kel can attest to. Like the first thing that I ever did in Flesh and Blood was put together Kel's Azalea deck.
Oh yeah.
And then I messaged him on Twitter about it, and I was like, "Hi, I'm new to Flesh and Blood. Can we be friends?" And just the thematic aspect of you have this class in this game that doesn't specifically have like this you have the whole idea of you're knocking an arrow and whatever. Like the game wasn't created with that in mind, but with the framework that they already had in place, they were able to use that to convey that thought of I'm going to take an arrow out of my thing, put it into my arsenal and ready it, and then fire it off. Yeah. And the second that clicked, I was like, "This game is phenomenal. This game is so cool." I do think after having played with it for so long, the thematic aspect is definitely overridden by the fact that it's not consistent enough. In that, if you do have, you're out of ways to reload your arsenal and you're just left with arrows in your hand, and they don't do anything else, then it just kind of feels bad. I think it's like my idea behind it is a little bit more of a nuclear option, but maybe there's some way that they can rework the arrow mechanics slightly, where it's like you're playing it out of an arsenal, but maybe rangers get a specific arsenal that's only for arrows, like only for face-up arrows or something.
New Horizon touches on it, doesn't it? New Horizon touches on the extra arsenal zones specifically. They could work that into a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, like what I said before about like the ranger tax, and like if you're a regular class, right, a good breakpoint is 0 for 4, right? That's a pretty good like aggro breakpoint. For ranger, there's literally almost never a 0 for 4 because you always have to pay for the bow, right? Unless you're playing redliner, which a lot of people don't play. It's always like at least 1 for 4. Because even your zeros, you still have that cost of, loading it with your bow, unless you're able to, set up ahead of time, in which case that's a whole other issue that other classes don't have to deal with. So, yeah, I mean, fundamentally, rangers just have like this tax on them. Are either of you familiar with the story about rangers in Arcane Rising? Like,
you've definitely told me.
Yeah, it was a thing kind of early on, and I'm not sure where this came from and how true it is. I think it came from an early interview with James, but don't quote me on this. If any listeners have any concrete information on this, please comment or just let us know, message us. But the idea is that initially Ranger was like overpowered, and they had to tune it back. Like in their initial testing, it was like too strong. And they had to like nerf it a little bit. Also, I heard that there was a different class, and I know this one is true. There was a different class in Arcane Rising, but it fit better somewhere else, and so they stuck Ranger there. So those are the two little bits of Ranger trivia that I know. And I always think about that when I think about like how Ranger is now. I'm like, I wonder if, like how strong it was could have been, and maybe the hate effects, because Ranger kind of leans into like these on-hit hate effects. Maybe they were just too good with how they originally were. I'm not sure.
Yeah. That's the thing that I think that really draws me to Azalea. That part of me that really wants Azalea to be like a hero that you can show up to an event with and not feel like you're at a disadvantage from square one.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you have Knock the Death Whistle, which is an insane tutor effect when it interacts with your hero so positively. It's basically ready an arrow and give it dominate. Like just crazy. And then you also have Red in the Ledger, which is basically just time walk if it hits. Like it stops your opponent from doing anything for a full turn, essentially. Like there's very few ways to get around it. But in a class where you have those two things, like arguably the strongest tutor in the game, and such a strong on hit effect, and draw 3 cards.
Yeah.
This class is still not good. Like I really want her to be good so that you can showcase just how strong those are. But I think Kel is on the right path where, even if you don't have your arrows up, maybe you can set up some sort of a trap. And instead of the traps that we got in like Crew and but the other ones in Arc, I'm pretty sure they were in Arcane Rising.
I think we've only gotten 3 traps, and they were all 3 in Crucible.
Yeah.
Right. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. But they sort of misstepped on the design space for them, I think.
I think you could say that. Yeah, I think you could say that.
Because
especially at the time where you only had one Arsenal zone as well.
Yeah. And that sort of ties in with another issue that I have with Ranger as a class. Every other class has the ability to use their arsenal for like, oh, I'll put this thing in here and I'll sit on it for a couple turns until it's relevant, or I'll put like a defense reaction in here or whatever. Rangers just can't do that, because you need your arsenal free to be able to attack. So it's like if you arsenaled a like a sink below or something, and then your opponent just like took a turn off from attacking you, you're now just stuck. Like you can't do anything until they attack you again. Which I think is like, it is part of the Ranger tax, but I think once you take into account all of the parts of the game that are being taxed by being a Ranger, I think it amounts to just a little bit too much. I think they could probably serve to be knocked into a lower bracket.
I agree. I think most people would agree too. Especially for Azalea. Lexi's up there. She's kind of climbing up there, but poor Azalea. Even though she has like some of the best specializations in the game, like you said, still not getting there. Any more Ranger thoughts before we move to the next one?
Yeah. I'll just throw in a card that I designed on this video that I made. So it's called Arrowhead Stab. This is something I would love to see. So choose an arrow card in your graveyard. Deal 1 damage to the opponent unless they pay X, where X is the cost of the arrow card chosen. If they take damage this way, trigger the on-hit effect of the arrow chosen.
Okay.
So obviously, if you're obviously with Ranger, you have to block with your arrows sometimes as well, which is never a good thing.
Yeah.
So if you chuck that arrow in the graveyard, you then use your arrowhead stab to bring it out of the graveyard and stab someone in the face with it. They can then choose to pay a certain amount unless they want to have the on-hit effect chosen. So if you imagine taking that Red in the Ledger out of the arsenal and stabbing them with it, when they're attacking you, this is a defense reaction, by the way, it just gives them more decisions that they have to make when they attack a Ranger. I think these sort of things, the sort of baiting and goading theme, could be worth exploring.
If that was like a 0 cost 4 defense reaction, and maybe the X value is like X plus 1, so that you can still do it with a 0 cost and still force them to pay, I think that would be sweet.
Yeah. I like that a lot too, because like in general you don't see Rangers run that many defense reactions because they can't really defend anyway, but that one plays in nicely with, like as you said, like recycling your arrows.
And getting a defense reaction stuck in your arsenal is like literally the worst thing with Azalea.
Yeah, it's a death sentence.
Yeah, if you're running New Horizon, you can kind of get around it, like with Lexi by turning it face up with her hero ability and then getting the extra arsenal spot. But even then, you're just telegraphing your defense reaction just sitting there.
Yeah.
But
before we move on, because obviously we spent a lot of time on this. I think in general, I think Rangers should be laying trends to attack, and they have to make extra decisions when they do so. And if they don't make the right one, they get punished for it. And when you are attacking, you should be aiming to hit them and all that sort of thing. So, yeah,
agreed.
I'm sure we'll get some good stuff.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways that we could make Ranger just even slightly better. Just tune it like here and there. Don't want it to be overpowered. Want it to be like on the same footing.
We have now confirmation of a product release schedule. That's going to be a big set and a supplemental set, which is now James is now calling them expansion sets. So we're going to be alternating big set expansion sets now. So a lot more opportunities for Ranger to get stuff. So fingers crossed. In due time, hopefully we'll get stuff. And Flesh and Blood is designed in such a way where they could just print something specifically for Azalea that's like another like busted card for Azalea that might put her over the top. Maybe we'll see like specialization equipment or something like that in the future where only Azalea can use it or something like that to bump up these heroes that don't have any high level wins, stuff like that.
And without it bleeding over to other people, like with Rosetta Thorn and Chain.
Yes.
I think that's a really good design space for them to explore.
Yeah, I really.
Yeah, I mean, they could chuck it in like stuff like classic battles, couldn't they? Like hero specific equipment that come with part of their story or whatever reason.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah,
absolutely.
Sweet. So the next question, it comes from the Armed Pit, which I think they do. They talk about Ultimate Pit Fight stuff, which is awesome. This question is, what's your ideal entry level product? I'm gonna toss this one to Az this time.
Ideal entry level product.
Yeah.
I think the fact that they're borrowing ideas already. Obviously, we literally just said this. Actually, it's funny that it's come up. But the Classic Battles product that's coming out soon, I think is a good product for people that might see it on the sort of local game store shelf. And there's 2 decks that you can just get out with. If you're out in a city or a town with your mate and you think, oh, Flesh and Blood, what's that? We'll pick that up because it's got a beautiful warrior lady on there and a massive brute. I can identify with a brute. I'm the brute. Oh, I'm the lady. Okay, then you get it off and you start playing. I think that's a good thing. And I mean, the fact that it's got sort of unique cards in it as well would also make it a bit of a purchase for people that are also entrenched in the game already. They want to pick up the unique stuff. So I think it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone with products like that. But I think it's a perfect product to have on the shelves. It's sort of like a board game where you can just get it for 2 people, family, friends, kitchen table, but also an entry point into the game as well. If you do want to have a look at it more competitively.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
So
it's going to be interesting to see like the what they do with the PvE stuff and where that will sort of lie.
Yeah, I'm very curious for the PvE stuff in particular, if they include pre-built decks or if it's just the PvE shell that you bring your own decks to. Because I've seen it done both ways with other card games, specifically like the World of Warcraft trading card game has done both, where they have raid decks where you bring your own deck to fight against the raid deck, but also there's the Ice Crown Citadel raid deck that has 3 pre-constructed decks that you play with, and then the enemy like PvE deck that you play against as well. So curious to see how they market that product. Personally, I like what they're doing right now. I think they can do a little bit more, but I do like what they're doing. I love the free Ira decks. Would like to see more stores get those. So like any store that carries Flesh and Blood always has like a nice backlog of Ira decks. And so if anyone ever, comes up, you can just be like, here you go, free deck. No questions asked. I think that is a good way to just getting people into the game. I love the Blitz decks. I would love to see more Blitz decks. Every single set. It looks like we talked about, we're going to have every other set be a big set. So it looks like we'll see these less frequently, maybe only once or twice a year. And so hopefully these classic battles decks supplement that time in between. Because if you're on a year where there's only 1 set of Blitz decks coming out, right, you'd need some other entry level product to kind of fill the void. That's
a good point actually, because our friend Joey from Decks and Drafts obviously made the Learn to Play kits, didn't he? So maybe that they should, I don't know, obviously I'm not LSS, but maybe they should look at just sort of a more sort of broader entry level load of decks like he's made, to get more people into it potentially. I don't know how that would work, but because at the moment it looks like they've just left it to the community to sort of do that sort of stuff with the entry level stuff.
Yeah, I think that their intent is, and this is something that I got after talking with James, is the IRA Blitz decks are literally, they want that to be your first entry point. Or I guess they're not Blitz decks, they're just the IRA welcome decks. Because they're free. Like that's what they want the entry point to be. And then the next step is the Blitz decks, the $12 Blitz decks. So you can kind of get a better feel of, core mechanics and that kind of stuff. And then they want the gap between that and then like building your own like fully fledged deck. That's going to be the Classic Battles product. That's like the next step. I would like to see another step, maybe a little bit beyond the Classic Battles. Now I'm saying this not knowing the contents of the Classic Battles decks. Like I don't know how competitive these decks are, but I would love to see, kind of like how Az said, a little bit more of an evergreen kind of thing. And you can maybe tie this in with like future History Pack releases. So maybe you'll have like History Pack 2 decks. And those are going to be like a reprint deck, but they have like cards from a bunch of different sets and they're like semi-competitive. Kind of like how Magic the Gathering has the event decks, I think is what they're called for Magic. Where they're like, they're like semi-competitive decks, like not quite the way, maybe 50% of the way there, but like it's a good place for someone who wants to play competitively where they can just buy the deck and then just fill it out with, whatever else they need, a couple legendaries, a couple majestics, and like you're good to go. So I'd like to see that kind of product as well. I think that could be really cool, especially since, Flesh and Blood doesn't rotate. So like seeing this later on, like in a year or two, would be awesome. It'd be a great way to get reprints and a great way to kind of just get your foot in the door without having to, scour through 4 years, 5 years of booster products.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? It's just like, because the sets don't rotate, as time goes on, if someone wants to play the older heroes, how do they get those heroes? Are they just defunct at that stage? Like 5 years later, is Katsu just not an option anymore?
I think the history packs are their solution to that. But I don't know how often they're going to reprint them. I mean, that's the thing. Like, do they reprint all the history packs every single time a new one comes out? Because they come out every 2 years. So, like, 2 years from now, we'll have History Pack 2 that has Arya, Monarch, and Everfest. And, like, at that time, I have a feeling we'll desperately need History Pack 1 again, right? Because it'll be, like, 2 years out of print, and all, like, people are going to need their E-strikes and, tunics and whatnot. So hopefully that's a product they keep printing, even if like they're not printing Welcome to Rathe or Arcane Rising anymore. Hopefully they'll just be like, yep, here's his History Pack 1 again. Yeah, it's whiteboarded, but here you go.
I absolutely loved the idea of History Pack 1 when they first announced it, because like even as, and I've said this before, even as an entrenched player, having easy access for new people to like the best of cards for a certain period of time, especially as it gets later and later where access to these cards isn't as easy. I think it's phenomenal. Like I don't care about the value of my own tunic if somebody else has a white border one. It like doesn't change anything, but then they're able to play with this card that is objectively very good. I was a little bit disheartened when I heard that the allocation was a lot less than what people were anticipating. Like my local game store apparently only got about 20% of what they were initially, either what they ordered or what they were promised or whatever. But same with you. I hope that this is something that they keep up and they just keep printing it. Because having that as like even, prize packs for events, I think that's a no-brainer for getting these cards just into circulation. And making sure that people have easy access to them. But my one complaint, if I'm able to give my own input onto the entry-level product thing, is the one complaint that I do have about the Blitz decks as they are. I do like them, and they're totally fine as decks, but they don't have a very easy like learn to play thing included.
Agreed. Actually, I agree.
Like for Magic decks, there's just a little like folded thing that just tells you the long and short of how to play and like what each of the cards does and whatever. But for the Blitz decks, it is literally just the cards and that's it.
Is there a QR code in there? I don't remember.
There might be, but I think it might not be this dire, but if I remember correctly, it literally just like sends you to the comprehensive rules.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean,
Um,
a QR code sending you to like an official How to Play, or even like an unofficial one, like the Tulane Community College How to Play, would be great. Some board games that I picked up recently do that. Like they have the rule book, but they also have like a big QR code at the beginning of the rule book. They're like, if you don't want to read this, just watch the video. And I'm like, sweet, I'm just gonna watch the video, put it on 2x speed.
yeah.
It's funny you mentioned this because the original Hero decks did have rule books in them. They had the old school tiny rule books that were like pretty thick actually. And so I think they backtracked on that, maybe for price, maybe they didn't think they needed them, but for whatever reason, I think it is interesting that they cut them out.
Yeah, but yeah, I like the Blitz decks as a starting point. I like the classic battles or whatever it is. I forget what the name of it is. Every 13 seconds, but I like the idea of that as like the next step up sort of deal. But my main concern, like when I was trying to get people into the game, and I just said, "Oh, you should pick up the Blitz decks," their next question was, "What do I do now?"
Oh yeah, that is very fair. That's very fair.
Yeah, but other than that, like I think they are doing very well, and they're being very receptive to the community, like by and large, from what I've seen. So yeah, what they're doing for entry level products thus far is really good, but I would love just a little bit more clarity on how to play the game contained within the actual entry level product.
I agree. There's actually what would be great is if they did do like a QR code thing, and once again, I don't know if they're doing this now or not, but there is a section on the official website. If you go to just fabtcg.com and you click on Welcome at the very top, just says Welcome to Flesh and Blood, and then it has like 4 things you can click that teach you how to play the game. There's like Learn to Play video, Quick Start rules, Print and Play decks. So just having like a QR code that just takes you to that would be great. Like I don't know if they do that already, but if they don't, that would be awesome because it's the information's already here, and then you can click whatever you need. And a small humble brag, one of my videos is on that section too, so you can watch one of my videos. It's my video is the how to start playing Flesh and Blood. I don't talk about the rules. I talk about the products, like all the available products and which ones to get as a new player.
Yeah,
But,
it's right on there, Red Zone Rogue. Hey.
Yep, and next to Noxious, Tulane Community College. Shout out to all these DM Armada, great dudes. Yeah, I agree. Next question. Oh, this is a doozy. All right, not a doozy that it's hard, but it might be a long question. So, what draws you to Flesh and Blood over other trading card games? And
yeah, that one's from Betty Electron at Betty Electron.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Maybe I shouldn't have started. This is gonna be long. All right, I'll try to make it quick. A lot of things, to be honest. I play a lot of card games, and I've played a lot of card games throughout my life. I've played almost all of the mainstream ones and tons of like little, I don't call them indie ones because they usually have big IPs. Like I played the Sailor Moon card game and the Gundam Wing card game and a lot of card games. But Flesh and Blood has a very unique mechanic system, and it's a lot of fun to play. Like at the end of the day, it's just a lot of fun to play. Every game, for the most part, is very close, with some exceptions. There can be some blowouts, but it's rare compared to a lot of other card games, right? A lot of games are very, very close, down to the wire. It feels like you're in like pitched combat with someone. It feels kind of like I described it when I first started playing Flesh and Blood and making videos about it. I described it like a fighting game. It feels like a fighting game between like 2 equally skilled fighting game players when it comes down to like a couple little hits, and it's really exciting and a lot of fun. I love the world. I love the lore. And, this comes at a time, if you're watching this video in the future, where not a lot of traditional fantasy settings exist in card games. There used to be a consensus where like, oh, there's a ton of them. There's actually not a ton of them right now. There's like, Magic the Gathering is kind of like gearing towards their own thing, right? They have cyberpunk sets. They have like mafia-based sets. Like they're doing their own thing, right? I wouldn't describe Magic as traditional fantasy anymore. It's just kind of like a mishmash of a bunch of different stuff. And other than Flesh and Blood, they're just doesn't exist like a, high or maybe even dark fantasy setting. Like, it just doesn't. Like, and
Yeah.
for that, I mean, that really appeals to me as like a longtime player of Dungeons and Dragons, and I really, really appreciate the world and the lore. So there's like, for me, it's many, many layers. The everything from the world, the characters, the game system is fantastic, and also I think I should mention this too. Something that really impressed me early on, and I'm always still impressed by them, is the company, Legend Story Studios. They impressed me early by just, being nice to me, and that's not something a lot of companies do to content creators, right? Like, not only did they acknowledge me, but they were like nice to me early on when my channel was much smaller.
Yeah.
And they continue to support the community, content creators of all sizes, and talking with the people who work there, getting to know them a little bit better. They're all like really genuine people, and they really just care about what they're doing, and not just for monetary reasons. Like, they care about the product they make, and they care about, like, the same things that we care about: the world, the lore, the mechanics. They want to make a good game. So all of those reasons are why I like Flesh and Blood over. It's why it's my favorite game.
Yeah, and I'll chip in of just one of those points that you said there with regards to the content creators behind the game. Now, obviously, on this podcast right now, we have potentially the largest Flesh and Blood content creator. We have Bill from the Spike Feeders, and we have me, all at different levels of our journeys with regards to creating content for the game, and yet we've all received, stuff from LSS to as appreciation for what we do at all levels, no matter what numbers we do. Yeah. They see the passion in what us as creators are doing, and they love that, which is fantastic. You wouldn't see that from any other company, I don't think, or at least I haven't. So yeah, that was very, very humbling when someone like myself, from my experience, still very, very small in comparison to what's out there, but yeah, very, very humbling on that side.
Absolutely. That was one of the things too that completely took me off guard. Like, we had been making Magic content for the Spike Feeders for years. I think we started September 2017 or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And we have never gotten a preview card or like a shout out or anything from Wizards for anything that we did, and we didn't like expect it. We wanted it, like we were trying to be as active as we could in the community and whatever, and we never fully expected anything from them, and we never got it, and we were like, okay, whatever. And then within, I don't know, it was like 3 months or something of us creating Flesh and Blood content, we got a shout, or we got a Chris Bewley reached out to us and was like, hey, do you want a preview card for Everfest? And we were like, yes, we really, really do. We were so excited. And then even before we got into Flesh and Blood in general, friend of the channel and personal friend, Olivia Gobert Hicks, who is an extremely talented cosplayer, got like a Prism care package from Legend Story Studios, because they were like, hey, we want you to cosplay Prism at this event. Here's all of the reference material you'll need to make like an accurate cosplay. And they also gave her, like, I think it was like, she mentioned like $2,000 worth of promo cards.
Yep.
In addition to like art and all this stuff. And it's like, that's so cool. It's such a hands-on, like, welcoming approach, just to be like, hey, we appreciate you and we appreciate your talents. And like, we want you to be part of our community. And it's very powerful, and it's very obvious when you talk to other people who are as entrenched in the game as we are. Yeah. Where you have these, from a balancing perspective, I have seen a lot of people say, oh, well, LSS doesn't know what they're doing, whatever. And like, they're still a young studio. They're still making a game that's relatively new. These things do happen. It's just like growth, but their heart is absolutely in the right place. And I think they're making all the right steps.
Agreed. Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the things that really draws me in addition to just how the game is played in general. I think the granular decision making within a game, the fact that if you sequence correctly, the game immediately rewards you, and it's such a great feeling. But in general, I just think that the potential for growth for Flesh and Blood is astronomical right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like I cannot see the ceiling of it. I think that there's still so much space for them to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, we still have so many regions left in the world to experience, so many talents. Yeah.
We've never actually been to Metrics.
We've never been to Metrics, the Pits, Mysteria, the Savage Lands. We're going to Volcor for the first time, but there's still like 4 other major regions that we haven't even been to yet.
And in the official art book, they had that like that whatever it was like a matrix or a graph or whatever of all of the different like vocations within Rathe.
Yeah.
Like basically talking about all the different heroes that there could be or all the different classes.
So that's another thing that James has mentioned.
Oh.
He said that all of those will be heroes eventually.
Yeah. And that's so sick because there's like apothecary, there's assassin, there's
necromancer,
cleric. Like there's so many cool ones on there, and it just gets you so excited. You're like, oh well, what is this hero gonna look like? What are they gonna do? What are their cards gonna do? Like, it's so cool, and I'm really excited to see where they go next.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Yeah, me too. So this is another little cheeky one. This is by Rodo Monte. Why did it take you so long? I assume they're saying in regards to making a weekly podcast. I mean, for me personally, it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. DM Armada and I tried, but because of like timing and scheduling, it was just kind of difficult. And I just kind of randomly shot out the idea to Bill and Az, and they were like, yeah. Like, I was like, what, really? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, dude, let's do it.
Yeah, that's like the whole story, really. We were filming a UPF game, and Kel was like, hey, I noticed that there's kind of a gap in the content creation sphere where there isn't just like a weekly, here's what's going on, here's like, you know, people just talking about stuff. And both Az and I just thought about that, and we're like, yeah, you're right.
We like to talk about stuff, whatever it may be.
And
I mean, here's a little insight. Like, you know, whenever we play our UPF games, whenever we film them, you know, it's always us 3 that are on for another 3 hours afterwards, just talking garbage.
Yeah,
that's true.
So, yeah.
Usually it's watching Kel open the rest of the box that he had opened for a Go Bananas.
Absolutely.
I mean, what else am I going to do with the box, I guess? I mean, I could do things with it, but I'll just open it up, right?
Yeah. But we were like already pretty comfortable chatting with each other. Like we're pretty good pals at this point. So
yeah,
100%.
Having more of an excuse to talk about Flesh and Blood, just, you know, it was the next logical step anyway. So I mean, thanks to Kel for initiating it.
Cheers. I mean, I just want to talk about Flesh and Blood more, and I was like, this is a great opportunity, I think. And like you said, like I saw like an opening, and there's a lot of like competitive podcasts and that kind of stuff, but I was like, let's just do like let's do a all encompassing one.
Yeah. We're here to appreciate every facet, every aspect.
So next question is from Mink Krenko Thrice Reborn at Goblin Boon. Underplayed and underloved heroes and cards. I swear any Ranger fan, or maybe even like Brute fan out there, is chomping at the bit for this one, I think.
Yeah.
So Mink is a very prominent member of our community, our Discord community, and he is an absolutely great guy. He is a meme lord above all else.
Nice.
And I know for a fact that when he wrote this, he wants me to talk about Levia. Levia is his favorite hero, like bar none. He loves everything about her because she's kind of, if you think about it, the goblin of Flesh and Blood.
Kind of, yeah.
Where, she just the whole aesthetic of her and the fact that she's like, you know, a little bit undertuned, which you could kind of argue.
I mean,
a little bit.
Her hero power is like the only hero power that's not a buff. It's like preventing her from dying. That's what her hero power is.
Yeah, it's literally just you could die, but sometimes you don't. Which is like cool. That's what every hero does at a base.
Yep.
But yeah, I definitely think that Levia. I have seen Levia played to like phenomenal success before.
100%.
One of the people that made it to our top 4 in our wasn't the skirmish, was it? Yeah, it would have been the PTQ. But one of the people that made it to top 4 was Levia, and they were slapping people all day. It was nuts. Like the amount of damage they were putting out on a Blood Rush Bellow turn was I had never seen it before.
They claw for 7, man.
Yeah,
it's brutal.
And it's the sort of thing though with like we were talking about with Ranger previously, where it is just like a consistency issue. And I think that, you know, if they had maybe a little bit more of a consistent way to selectively banish cards from their graveyard just to turn off Blood Debt, or if they had more cards that sort of worked off of however many cards you have in your Blood Debt to, you know, the further you are in debt, the more of a like one last push you can get. But yeah,
it makes
I think
sense
that
as well because, you know, thematically she's, you know, demonic, isn't she? So, you know, the more in debt to your deity that you are, the more power you're going to have, but the more on the edge you're going to be.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, so I have 2 little stories about Levia. The first one is from the Pro Tour. We actually got Levia on feature match. So if folks out there love Levia and you'd like to watch some high-level Levia played, there is a feature match of a friend of mine, Ian Kenderdine, piloting Levia at the Pro Tour. I'm not going to spoil how that ended, but Ian is definitely a showman and it is a very, very fun match to watch. He's one of the people that I like. He's a friend of mine, and he was piloting Levia, so it was really easy for me to convince the coverage team to put him on. He was 2-0 at the time, by the way. So I was like, I have a friend of mine. He used to work at LSS. He's like one of the first players to reach 1,000 lifetime XP, and he's piloting Levia. And I'm like, we need to get this guy on the feature match. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So it's a very cool match. And then the other one is same guy, Ian Kenderdine. Just did a pro quest yesterday, and he got in the top 8 with Levia. In fact, 2 Levias got in the top 8 of their pro quest, and this was like a stacked pro quest because this is in New Zealand, and I think the competitors were Matt Rogers, Cale McCreath, Nick Butcher, all incredibly skilled players, and 2 Levias made it into the top 8. So there's some skilled Levia players out there, definitely some Levia love. So you know, you'll love to see it.
Was Ian wearing his Brute Squad T-shirt on that stream as well?
I think so. I got a little bit of the footage of him physically playing in my Pro Tour recap. Like you can kind of just see him playing. He might be wearing the Brute Squad shirt. I actually helped him playtest that deck. I was like, he was preparing for the Pro Tour, and I was like, hey, I'll help you playtest. What deck do you want me to build? And he's like, chain. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going net deck, whatever top chain deck there is. I'll just run it into your Levia. And he's got some really explosive turns. Yeah, Levia can be a powerhouse, and Levia can also just kill herself. So that's how it goes. Any other underplayed and underloved heroes and cards you guys want to talk about before we move on? I know we talked a lot about Ranger already.
Yeah. I think we can just put that in here. We can just like refer back to when we were talking about Ranger, have that be another entry. But honestly, right now, I think that not necessarily by the community, but I think that Katsu is kind of underloved by LSS. I think the design space of combo is so cool. But the fact that, you know, they've only had the supplemental sets to sort of build out their repertoire, and the fact that Everfest really only had stuff for Benji. Like you can play some of the stuff in Katsu, but it doesn't really mesh with the game plan as well. I would love to see where they're going with Ninja next, because I think that it's almost there. Just needs a little bit more support.
It's coming too, isn't it?
Coming. See, I was gonna say. I agree with that. I think there's 2 that I think are underplayed and underloved right now, but that's going to change in the next like year and a half. I think Ninja is going to see a resurgence with Uprising, because every new Flesh and Blood set, all of the heroes are like bangers and they become like top tier heroes for the most part. Even Ranger has been able to sneak up, you know, get some wins there with Lexi. And then the other one is Mechanologist, and I would bet a lot that the next big set after this one, not the next immediate set, but the next big set, will heavily feature Mechanologist. So I have a feeling that Mech will have its day soon.
I'm excited to see that too. I love Mechanologist.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big deal too when it hits, because of just how Mechanologist functions and the fact that the Mechanologist border and Dash's border are the same border. Kind of play into this. Someone asked this at the Pro Tour to James, because they're like, well, is Mechanologist a class or a talent, right? Because usually the heroes' borders signify what talent they have. So if you look at, let's say, let's pick like Levia, right? So she has the shadow border, because she has the shadow talent, and she's from Demonastery, so they all kind of coincide. Same with the new hero like Dromai and Phi. They have the Draconic border, signifying that they have the Draconic talent, and also that they're from Volcor. Same with Kano. Doesn't have the Draconic talent, but it signifies that he's from Volcor. Well, the Mechanologist, like Dash, has that mech border, but so do all of the mech cards, which is like unique. There's no other case that this happens in the game, right? When you think about like the Ranger border, for example, like Azalea doesn't have that border. She has a different border. So I think
same border as Cavdane.
Yeah, so I think Mech is going to be... They got some weird stuff going on. James mentioned it. He didn't speak too much, but he says it will make sense, and it's all there for a reason. So I think Mech's going to be pretty spicy when we go to metrics.
Yeah, it all goes back to as well a podcast well, not a podcast, but a discussion I was on where we looked at the Everfest cards, and one of the cards on there was Blade Runner.
Yeah,
and if you look at the art, it looks like it's basically a warrior but with mech gear on. So it could even be a talent when we go to metrics, couldn't it? Like you said, it could be like mech warrior or mech something.
Mechanologist warrior. Man, that's a lot of typeface. Be really small font.
Yeah.
But yeah,
the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that. All right, so next one from Michael Schroeder at M Shredda. What do you believe to be the most underrated or underused card in the game? So not specifically hero or talent or anything general, but just a card. What do you think is the most underrated card in all of Flesh and Blood?
This question is like deceptively hard.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking at this sort of question, you're either trying to parse it as what class card is underused by their hero or what generic card is underused overall, which makes it just very slightly.
I think I have one, but it's very specific to Blitz. I think Vest of the First Fist is currently very underused. Now, it might be more used now that Hardened Crosstrap is banned, but Vest of the First Fist, Blitz is like a 3-turn format these days, and so you're not really going to get tons of use out of your Tunic, and Vest of the First Fist in an aggro deck is like double a Tunic in that time period, and it's also like dirt cheap. And I think people running Tunic, there's a good chance if you're running Tunic and you're playing an aggro deck that I think Vest is just better for your deck. Yeah. So that's my pick.
I think largely in Blitz, Tunic is like not a good card.
Yeah, it's like it's like an iron rod plate, basically.
Yeah. That like sometimes has the upside of making you a single resource, which is like fine, but yeah, in CC you can definitely see it shine more when it starts adding like 2 or 3 resource over the course of a game. I think, and this is kind of a weird one because I think like in general the talismans and items from Everfest didn't see a lot of love. I think that which one is it? Talisman of Warfare. The one where if you deal 2 damage, like exactly 2 damage to a hero, it breaks and you destroy all cards and arsenals. I saw a list that was playing a 1 of that in Chain, and I think that that's like the biggest brain thing of all time. And I think it's a shoe-in for the deck at the very least as a 1 because you're playing Rosetta Thorn, and that's 2 instances of 2 damage.
No joke. When I was building my UPF wizard deck, I really wanted to include that and then the Aether Conduit that deals 2 arcane damage, and just to kind of get people like get him with the Aether Conduit and the stupid talisman.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I think that's like, I don't know, that to me, when I saw that and I was like, oh, why is this guy running this card? I mean, it pitches for 2 resources. It's a non-attack action with go again, like, sure. And then I played it out and attacked with the Rosetta Thorn, and my mind just like imploded on itself. I was like, oh my god, this is crazy.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, so I think
just a fringe scenario, isn't it? But it's great.
Yeah, but I think basically in any chain deck, I'm going to be running at least one, just because I think it works. It puts in so much work.
I think it's sweet. Yeah. Do you have a pick, Az?
What about you, Az?
Underrated card that I use quite a lot because I play a lot of Azalea, always tinkering with it. One I think is something is very, very underrated, but potentially not used in current metas and what have you, is Feign Death, which basically just says if you've been dealt damage this turn, you pay 1 as an instant, you prevent damage from the next source. You just literally just say no to that. So it's basically a counter spell. But it only really works if you're being hit multiple times, and if you're being hit multiple times, you're not really getting a huge bit of value out of it, because you're normally getting hit for like 4, 5, rather than just like 4. I did have a use against Wizard with it, because obviously Wizard can do a massive amount of damage out of nowhere, especially on the last things they do, like Blazing Aethers and stuff. So if you play Feign Death against a Blazing Aether, you could basically prevent 20 odd damage from one source. So it's definitely a sideboard card for against Wizards now that I've found Feign Death. I usually used to play like a lot of take covers. I do like the take covers as well. But yeah, Feign Death I think is one that I really like. And it might see more play going forward, because it might be more ninjas, more aggro stuff. So we'll see.
I kind of hate Feign Death because back in, this is right when Crucible of War came out, I was playing OTK Viscerai, like an old school OTK Viscerai, right? Where you would basically, you'd crack your Skeleton, but you wouldn't be doing Sonata Arcanix because it wasn't out yet. You would be doing like Slogism into Arknight Ascendancy. So that would be like 11 Dominate plus like a million Rune Chants. And then you would create a bunch of Rune Chants on the back of the Dominated. So what I was playing against, shout out to Fab Foundry, I was playing against Onnit from Fab Foundry. In the Flesh and Blood, because he's local here, and I was kind of comboing off, not comboing off. I was going off, right? It was my kill turn, and I crack my Skeleton, play my red Slogism for free, play my Arknight Ascendancy with Pummel in hand and a resource, right? Oh. So I was ready to get him, and I'm like, all right, here you go, and he goes, I'll take the Rune Chant damage, and then I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, Feign Death everything else. And I was like, oh no. Oh, this is like the perfect card. It like prevented 11 damage and made it so my Pummel was useless. Like,
oh, so good.
Yeah.
I mean, it can
prevented
be
the Rune Chance.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's the thing. I actually asked some folks in my Discord, like, is there a way that I can damage myself because I want to play Feign Death at any time? You know, if there was a card that said deal 1 damage to yourself, I would take it because I want to be able to play it at any time. Because, you know, if you were playing against Starvo, for instance, and he hits you with a Dominated Crippling Crush, and if you Feign Death it, it does absolutely nothing. And that's the reason why I think Kano was so good against Starvo, is because it doesn't matter whether you're discarding your hand, because you can play on their turn anyway.
Yep.
So I think that was one of the main things why he was so disruptive. I know I'm going off a bit off topic here, but I think we should see more cards that interact with the player's hand, because if you're starving them of their hand, I think that's another great design space that they could go into that can disrupt them completely. And Lexi does a little bit of it. There's a couple of Ranger Azalea cards that strip stuff from the hand, but I think it's another potential strategy that's underutilized is discard effects.
Yeah. One of my favorite cards in the game is the Winter's Bite, the ice card that does that. Like they have to pay some resources, particularly the blue one. I love the blue one. because it
They
forces.
still have to pitch. They still have to
yeah.
discard anyway.
Like it,
Yeah.
no matter what, they have to get rid of something. And the blue one, it's even more hilarious because it's like you have to pay one, but I mean,
Yeah.
it still rips an entire card from their hand unless they've got like a tunic or something active.
Exactly.
So it's super nice.
So I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, that's where we ended up.
Yeah, no, I agree though. I like. I think there's a lot of design space in Flesh and Blood for that.
Absolutely.
So, what are your predictions for the next set of heroes after Uprising? And I kind of already talked about this a little bit, but will we continue on the 3-hero train, or will they go back to 4? Will there be only existing hero classes, or will they add new classes to the mix? And I think we already talked about that too. This is from Emery Powell at Emery Powell 6. I'll fire this off real quick and let you guys talk because I mentioned all of these things a little bit already. I think we're definitely going to be seeing Mechanologist in the next big set. I think because it's the only class that hasn't had a second big set support in the entire game now. Before it was Illusionist, Ninja, and Mech, and now that we have Illusionist and Ninja and Uprising, Mech's the last one. So I think Mech is a pretty good bet. For the 3-hero thing, I don't know. I think it can go either way depending on how they want to go. I think if it's a Metrics pit set, I think if it's like a combined Metrics pit set, I think 2 and 2 makes a lot of sense. Like 2 from each region. And then the only existing hero classes or add new classes. This is just a fact. James literally said that every single class that appeared in the lore book will appear in Flesh and Blood eventually. So we're definitely going to see some new classes at some point as well. But that's my little spiel. I'll kick it off to you guys to elaborate if you'd like to.
I'm interested to see what Az thinks here.
So I would absolutely love for it to be 4 in the next one, like you said there. If it is Metrics, obviously Metrics is joined to the pits. The people of Metrics know of the pits. They call it names and stuff. I think it's called like the Gaping Maw. It sounds dirty, but the Gaping Maw
sounds like a Dark Souls boss.
Yeah. That sounds like a nickname for the Tom El Tai Madrid dragon, the just gaping maw in its chest. So, but yeah, I think that would be a fantastic set to have two heroes of each talent, very very similar to Monarch, where we had light versus shadow. In Metrics, it's going to be rich versus poor, almost, or scoundrels versus higher echelons of society. I think that sort of conflict would be quite good, and therefore fitting for 2 heroes of each talent. So I think that's a good shout, potentially.
Any predictions from you guys on what classes we might see coming up soon?
Oh, it's got to be the Red Zone Rogue, surely. It's got to be the Assassin.
Oh, dude. I'm going to freak out when they do Assassin. Like, I want to... I'm so looking forward to it.
You know you're getting those cards as well, don't you?
Fingers crossed, man. If I ever get to spoil a hero, I want it to be the Assassin, man.
Absolutely.
That would be so cool. Yeah.
I think it would be a major fumble if they didn't, you know? Like,
oh, man.
I think you've solidified yourself as the Red Zone Rogue. So.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Assassin is a subclass of Rogue in D&D. It's just like, it's perfect. It's perfect.
It's all right there. It's a gimme.
Yeah.
I don't know specifically what classes are going to be coming next, and obviously like that's super obvious. Why would I know? But the ones that I would love to see are ones that we've kind of already talked about. I would love to see like maybe a new type of ranger, just so that we can explore that space a little bit more. Maybe they can attempt to fix some of their past, overbalancing, as it were. I'd love to see Mechanologist and Ninja, because they're the only established classes that we have thus far that have had only one sort of set to deal with. I guess Illusionist is the same, but we have them coming up soon, so I'm going to stroke them off the list. And then I think the class that I'm most excited for, like on the horizon, is probably Bard. Just because I want to see what they're going to do with it. Because obviously I'm pretty sure every single person, if you're looking at it from like a PvE perspective, you can see what a bard's going to do, right? It's just going to be about healing spells and whatever. But it's like, how do you balance that when you're fighting against, in a 1v1 combat scenario against a brute? It's like, I am a healer. I'm a tiny little healer, man. You're thinking of like the sort of like the white mage from Final Fantasy. Yeah. How do you balance that as a 1v1 fight? and I think they can do it.
So that's
but I just don't know what that's going to look like.
That's interesting design space. So we do have Yorick as the bard. Do you think they'll start printing support cards for these oddball classes? So we have Yorick as a card, but we also have something like Cavdane, right, who's a merchant, and we don't have any support for either of them. Do you think we'll start seeing support like that, maybe in like a supplemental or expansion set, or where do you think they go with that?
We've got to see.
I think so.
We've got to.
Yeah, for Cavdane, we did see a little bit of support in Everfest. We got silver palms and a bunch of their things that interact with silvers and coppers.
Oh yes, it's silver palms is a merchant equipment, isn't it?
It is specifically a merchant equipment.
Yeah, that's
but
interesting.
the other cards that are like kind of merchant support are generics.
Yeah.
So I will like that. That is sort of a given. But I think they could definitely start printing class cards. Also, I think I misspoke and said bard when I definitely meant cleric.
That
But
makes
both.
sense.
I would still love to see both from like a, because Yorick and even to an extent like Taylor are like promo cards. They're not really meant to be within Flesh and Blood, like the major competitive aspect of it.
Oh, for sure. They're only legal in UPF anyway.
Yeah. So like what are we gonna do once we see an actual like cleric or bard hero? What is that gonna look like?
As an aggro player, the idea of a cleric just scares me. I'm like, please just stop healing. Like I can think of that already.
Yeah, exactly.
Are they going to do that? Like lean into self heal and life management and stuff? Because then I think that elongates games too much. It's like the old him effect, where if you print too many cards for this cleric class that help you survive long enough, but then don't give you tools to end the game, then everybody just goes to time and there are a bunch of ties and stuff, and that's not fun.
Interesting.
So if they do print a cleric class in a main set, how are they going to do it? Like that's the sort of thing that I'm focused on, is I really want to see how they're going to implement it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because I can see him going like a battle cleric paladin kind of route, right? So they have a bunch of attacks, but maybe the attacks, on hit heal or prevent damage or something like that.
Yeah.
That is very interesting to think about. Or if they just lean in, like I'm just gonna heal a bunch. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird line that they have to walk, but I think they can do it. There's a bunch of different routes that I think they could potentially take. Not any one of them is objectively correct, but I do just really want to see it. I have these, I think I have 2 extra Heart of Fyendals currently. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And I just want an excuse to be able to run them and have the life gain like mean something. Like actually, like if you gain life and a trigger happens because it's on your hero, like I think that would be really cool.
That's it. I'm gonna bring Sun Kiss and Moonwave to the map.
Exactly.
Yeah, bring it back. Nice. All right. So that was that question. I love how elaborate we're going with these. The next one is from Tom Lost But Seeking at Smith's account. And it says, what advice would you give to people wanting to grow a community in their area? So I think this is one that you wanted to talk about, Bill. Or what tips would you give to people who want to play FAB competitively? So those are pretty 2 different ones. Let's talk about the community one, and I'll toss it to you, Bill.
Yeah.
So something that I've found a lot of success with personally, in terms of our local community, is making sure that the types of events that are being held are diverse. Because it's very easy for somebody, especially from a store owner perspective, and I have talked to my both of my local game stores as owners about this sort of thing, and they've seen a lot of success in terms of just butts in seats. Like people are here to play with Blitz events because it's super easy. You can either pick up a Blitz deck or you can throw one together. It's not difficult or expensive to at least get playing. But once you have people that are sort of established and they're getting into playing on a regular basis, they start tuning up their decks. They start becoming a little bit more competitive. And it makes it a little bit harder for the newer players to really want to come back on a regular basis, because there are some people in our local meta that are newer and they they just like the community aspect of it. They like, hanging out with people. All the people in our local meta are just like really accepting and cool, and that's like another part of it. But we have had some people that are like, I don't care if I lose every match because I'm coming out to play. And even though they're saying that, like, it would feel bad, right? You come out to an event, you're paying for the entry, you sit down and you just get slapped around all the time. And so like that, like just making sure that you have other options. Like one of the things that we're actually looking into at one of our stores is starting up commoner events.
Oh, nice.
And commoner very much levels the playing field. And it does focus a little bit more on skill rather than money, even though I did say that that's not like a huge thing for Flesh and Blood. But when blitz games are so fast anyway, like the legendaries sometimes do matter.
Yeah, and it takes the level of entry, the barrier, to basically zero, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the other things that I've I've been trying to like swing this in a way that allows me to justify it a little bit better. But I buy a lot of sealed product, and so I have a lot of bulk. So whenever somebody new comes in to our community and they're like, oh, I'm really interested in playing this class, but I don't have any cards for it. I'm like, okay, I will come back next week and I will put together a care package of every single common and rare that you will ever need for this class.
Yeah.
And just like, just provide that, because it doesn't affect me. Like even if I wanted to sell them, it would end up being like a couple bucks, like it's much more valuable to me to have a new player have access to every single, at least basic card that they could. Because then, maybe they then say, you know what, I do want to buy these Majestics. They're like $5 each. I didn't feel right about it before, but I can see now why they're good. They can make sort of a more informed decision about it, instead of just being like, well, to play this game, I'd have to put in a bunch of money and I don't want to do that. And so that's another thing that I've seen a lot of personal success with, is just making sure that people, it's the old adage, the first one's free.
Right. Yeah. Just got to get on
back. But yeah, how about you guys? Have you had any initiatives that you've taken to sort of grow your local community?
Well, I mean, I could talk a little bit about this locally here in Portland. I'm fortunate in that I kind of didn't have to. So early on, I did. Early on, this is super early. I'm talking about like before Arcane Rising came out. I got the LSS sent me booster box, some of the hero decks, some playmats, and I immediately loved the game. And I just wanted every place to carry it. And that was a very tall ask. I called all of my LGSs, especially the ones that I would frequent, and the ones that I'd play like D&D at, and they all basically told me no. They were like, no, we don't sell anything that's not Magic or Pokemon. Is basically the answer I got for a lot of places. Fortunately, on the other hand, we did have a couple places that were already kind of carrying it. So I do want to give a shout out to Gongai Games in Beaverton. They're a little bit far away from me, but they've been carrying Flesh and Blood since almost the start. And then you also have Fabled Hobby and Fab Foundry, who now opened up his own store called Discs and Dice, a brick and mortar store here. And they've been champions of the game for a very long time. So fortunately for me in my area, at least locally, I had these other people who were kind of like championing it. For me personally, I figured my role would be to help grow the game awareness, like online. And that's always been one of my big goals, is to get people to play the games that I love, and I don't love any game more than Flesh and Blood, so that's a big goal for me, is just to try to get people to play the game. And whenever anyone comes up to me at an event, or they just leave a comment and they say, hey, you're the reason why I play Flesh and Blood, then I'm like, that's amazing. That's the best thing that I can hear, is because it means what I'm doing is getting the effect that I want. And so, yeah, that's where it is from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, for me, I don't have a store local to me that does it either. So my sort of motivation really was starting a YouTube channel, and setting the precedent from the start. This statement like, if you build it, they will come. Be the change that you want to see in the world. All that sort of stuff is relevant, because there's a lot of people that are in my Discord or in my community that don't have local game stores, but they have online setups due to the pandemic. So it's a place where people can come to play that wouldn't actually be able to play the game else, in their local game stores. They don't have one, but they still like the game for the same reasons I do, like the lore. They've got into it through the characters and everything, and they want to explore the game that way. They want to just get boxes in their own time, and they can't venture out for whatever reason that is. That's the reason I built the channel and set the precedent from the start. So I think that's a whole nother space entirely is online communities and building that up for people to come and feel comfortable in that environment as well. And I think I've had a bit of success with that as well, like the Go Again Gaming Open tournaments that I do that are all live streamed on the day. There's people from all over the world in there that play on the day in all different time zones that are getting involved, and they might not have stores that they can play at, or they can't go to stores for whatever reason. So I think that is another very, very important aspect of building the community, and we've got an awesome one in this game, I think. So
yeah, I agree.
Awesome people in it.
100%.
Yeah.
The second part to that question was tips on getting into competitive play. Now, none of us are really like Pro Tour grinders here, but I can give a couple tips just in general, right? If you're coming in and you've never played a competitive TCG and you want to get into it competitively, I can give you a couple tips. But it's all going to come down to hard work. Because I used to play competitive Magic and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually, way back in the day in like high school. I played in what was called the Super Series for Magic the Gathering. If you're old like me, you might know what that is. I played in the Super Series and I played in the Junior Super Series. And what it boils down to is playing a lot. Like, playing a lot, and testing and refining your deck and knowing everything in and out. And it really just kind of just boils down to play testing, playing. If you can find a good group of folks to do that with, that will help you a ton, like infinitely, especially like-minded individuals with really good like work ethics, and like who will help you get better. And there's a saying like steel sharpens steel or whatever. Just if you can find people who are better than you, that's even better. In my opinion, like playtesting with people who are at the same skill level or better than you will definitely help you get better. Losing helps you get better, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize when they start out. Like they just want to win all the time, but you can learn a lot more from losing than winning.
Definitely.
And having that mentality of like, not just like taking your lumps or whatever, but growing and learning from loss is really what makes like successful pro players very successful. And so that's basically my tips. Just play a lot, and you got to really get in the right mindset. If you get salty when you lose a lot, then it's going to be a rough path for you.
Yeah. I definitely find myself doing that sometimes, where especially like the way that you can learn from losses is by going over the game and sort of trying to find out what that one decision point is. Because usually, at least in my experience, in a game of Flesh and Blood, there is kind of that one where it's like, if I had sequenced this differently, if I didn't block with this, it's like, then you can sort of see the cascading effect through the game. And you can kind of get lost in that. Again, speaking totally from personal experience, but that is the type of thing that you should be looking for, where it's like, like in this sort of situation, if I didn't block this, or if I blocked this with more than one thing, then you can really start to then say, okay, now when I'm going to make a decision like that, I should take a second and try to sort of anticipate what the repercussions of this is going to be. And being able to think that like even 1 or 2 steps ahead really does help out just from a critical standpoint, especially in a game that has so many, as I said earlier, like granular decision points, where it's, am I going to try to keep this to pitch it for later? Am I going to, maybe pivot my game plan from an aggro perspective to a more control perspective? Like, do I just want to start blocking out with my full hand every turn? And that is really, like, as you said, Cal, something that only comes with experience. You can read as many articles as you want But you really won't be able to put that into practice until you're actually in the scenario and you have to think about it critically and just say, okay, here's what I'm given, here's what I should do. Like it is something that does come to you eventually. Like it feels when you're in the moment like you're never going to get it, where it's like, oh man, I still don't know what to do here. But as long as you just enjoy the game, like you will eventually just start getting better at it.
Yeah.
It sounds super like hand wavy, where it's like, you'll get it eventually, but no, you just keep playing the game and it will start to make more sense. The pieces will start to show themselves a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, like the people you see like at the Pro Tour and like on coverage, I mean, they've literally played hundreds and hundreds of hours of Flesh and Blood, like just an absurd amount.
Yeah.
And finding yourself like a testing partner that will help you go through these processes is very, very valuable. I mean, it's not obviously possible for everyone, but finding someone who will walk you through these situations, like, oh, what could we have done better and on this turn? Like, was this the most optimal turn? And talking through those kind of things just very much helps. I mean, you see this sometimes in some of my videos that I play with like Ian and some other folks. So, like, I do a turn and then I immediately think about it and I'm like, actually, I think I could have done that much better. Like, I think I could have done that turn like, more optimally.
It's like the UPF games. We have a take-seat, back-seat ticket that we can use only once.
Yeah, that's just like how I function. Like I always think about that kind of stuff. Like even after I've done the turn, I'll usually think about it and realize it like seconds after I do it, and I'm like, wait a minute, pretty sure I could have done something better. But
Yeah. That's just for a quick peek behind the curtain. That's actually what we do on our Gauntlet series pretty frequently. Is we have like at the beginning of a turn, we'll like pause for a second, and then it's like, okay, I need to tank about this. I need to like just think about how my turn is going to go, and just to make for really good, at least as good television as we can. Sometimes we'll actually like crowdsource it to the opponent and be like, okay, this is what I have, this is what I'm trying to do, and we'll just be completely open about it because. Like it's not like we're actually playing for prizes or anything.
Yeah.
And it is valuable to sort of talk through it, especially when you're first starting to get the hang of like a deck or, a specific card that you're now playing, how it fits in. And it allows you to then have a little bit more insight to the opponent's deck as well, to have, against certain matchups, you're trying to think of, okay, well, the way that they played, the way that they're playing right now, do I think that it's like possible for them to have a defense reaction to blow me out? Or, should I go all out here because it's likely that they'll have X, Y, and Z? Having a play partner that is willing to, just chat through it and be like, this is just objectively what can be done here, is phenomenal and only helps to grow that.
With regards to competitive play, you can sort of explore those avenues a lot easier now because of the fact you can access online discords that are dedicated to testing decks.
Oh yeah.
So I think it is a lot easier to get into that sort of play pattern now with discords and stuff and groups of people that are dedicated to playing it online. So you don't necessarily need a in the flesh and blood testing partner anymore. So I think that's a lot better.
Agreed. All right, next question. Let me try to find it. There were a lot of questions. Thank you, by the way, to everyone who sent in questions. These are absolutely fantastic questions.
There's lots of really, really great questions that provide a lot of room to think.
Yeah, and this one is a little less thinky because it's about Brute. And Brute, like Smash, no think, all Smash. So this is by the best Ryan ever, 30 plus years, at the best Ryan ever. And it says, will there ever be a Brute that doesn't care about the number 6? Mostly joking, but with the existing Brute card pool, I wonder if a new Brute that doesn't care about 6 would need a good amount of new cards printed alongside them. So I actually have a little bit of insight into this. If you read the article where James White first introduced the talent system, he actually used Brute as an example. So he used Brute as an example of, specifically Levia, of a Shadow Brute. So incorporating elements of the Shadow mechanic and incorporating elements of the Brute core class mechanic. And so, unfortunately for this question, I think the answer is no, because he outlined that 6 power is one of the core brute mechanics. Like, brutes care about strength, and 6 is like their break point. So it's just something inherent to the brute class. Now, will that always be the case? I mean, maybe not. Like, there might be a brute that cares about 5 or something. Like, just that's like a little bit off. Maybe they're like only care about like really strong attacks, like 8. But that's just kind of like a core part of the brute class. So that's what I have to say about that. If you guys have anything to add to that one.
I think it makes sense for them just to be caring about strong attacks.
Yeah, and like 6 just kind of makes sense from how breakpoints work in Flesh and Blood, where that's like that's where you're blocking with 2 cards, or your opponent is blocking with 2 cards in order to prevent stuff. So 6 does make sense. I could see there being a brute that doesn't care necessarily about the attack value somehow, and focus more on, they do a lot of draw and discard stuff. Maybe there's what's that one very small attack that is draw, discard, go again?
There's a couple of those from Root now.
It's from Crew. It costs 1. I think the blue attacks for 2, and it has go again, like just inherently. I can see it in my mind.
But... Think Later, I think it's called.
Yes. Yeah. So there's something like that where that's. I only think of the blue one because it's like used as resource early, and then sometimes if you need to trigger Intimidate later in the game, then you can get it in your second cycle. But I don't know, maybe there's some sort of a graveyard strategy in the works for Brute that isn't Levia, where you're working off of the amount of cards in your graveyard, or you can bring cards back from your graveyard after cycling through some stuff.
Or like something like the total power of cards in your graveyard does something.
Yeah, like I think there is design space there. I don't know that it's necessarily design space that I think they absolutely need to explore, because I think the 6 matters thing is like fine, and there's enough stuff. There's enough support in it already to make it not a huge deal. But yeah, I could potentially see it in the future.
Yeah. All right, cool. Next question. This one's by Fabled Academy, at Fabled Academy. I actually got to meet them at the Pro Tour. Very, very nice folks. I was, completely exhausted every time I got to meet them, but they were very nice. This is a very simple question. We've talked about it a little bit already, but I guess we can touch upon it specifically here. It says, how to get into the game as easily as possible. So what's the easiest way to get into Flesh and Blood? What do you guys think?
I would say probably commoner at this point.
Oh yeah, that's good.
The fact that there's now like official support for it, or at least there's now official like articles on their website detailing what it is. I think from a card availability standpoint, and already I felt that Blitz was a really, really easy way to get people into the game, because games are nice and quick. 2 of each card, like it allows you to get more reps in, instead of being stuck into a game where, at 40 life, where either you get into a point where neither player really knows how to navigate the rest of the game, you run out of resources or something, or it ends up just being a stomp on one side, and it ends up being a little bit longer than Blitz games when they're a stomp on one side, because instead of a 2-turn game or whatever, it can be a 6-turn game in CC or something similar. So I already thought that Blitz was fine, and now I think with the official support for Commoner, it's that much easier.
Yeah.
And everybody's kind of on the same level.
Yeah, I'm gonna add on to that a little bit. I think if you are brand new, if you're listening to this, you're brand new, you have not picked up a Flesh and Blood product at all, you don't know where to start, I think you have 2 really good options if you have a local game store. So this is assuming you have a local game store that carries Flesh and Blood. Go to your local game store and ask for the free Iroh welcome decks. That's the best way to do it. Just ask for 2 and learn to play with a friend. Barring that, get whatever the most recent Blitz starter decks are. Those are like $12, and buy a couple of them and learn to play with your friend. And then extrapolating from that and adding on to what Bill was saying, those blitz decks are usually like mostly commons anyway. And if you can just convert that into just a straight up commoner deck, you can probably go pretty far from there. It's probably pretty easy to transition your let's just use a Phi Ninja commoner or a blitz deck into a commoner deck, picking up a couple key ninja cards. So I think that's a really good way to go. Buy your $12 blitz deck, learn to play with a friend, and then you can just transition into commoner from there and play like with fully tuned commoner decks. So you're not playing with just kind of like the starter deck experience. Though that's the path that I would take if you're brand new and you have a local game store. If you don't have a local game store, I would still recommend buying the $12 blitz decks. But you also have some other community options like decks and drafts. Joey has these fantastic like custom made decks, and that could be another option that you go for as well. But that's kind of where I would start.
Yeah, just start with the community content and reaching out to people and asking where can I start with this, because we're all very, very open and we're all happy to help with stuff. And I think that's another great thing about the community. Everyone's happy to help. So by all means, jump into this game. If you're listening to this podcast now in the future, ask us.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm happy to chat with anybody who is interested in playing the game. Because the amount of people that have just messaged me about like just being excited about the game, like it's just cool every time. It's you get to experience it all over again, being like just so genuinely excited about a card when you come across it and you're like, oh my god, this is so cool, and then I can respond and be like, yeah, I know, right? Isn't it crazy? Like I don't know, it makes me feel young.
I love it, man. Absolutely love it. All right, next question. This is going to be, it could be a little bit of a longer answer. I'm going to try to make it quick on my part, because I do want to get through all the questions, and we still have like a good chunk left. This is from Rich Gapinski at Polish Sports, and it says, your beginnings into gaming, top 3 favorite TCGs of all time, Magic and Flesh and Blood excluded, and top 3 favorite other games, board games, computer, or whatever. So I'm gonna just rapid fire this one, like without going too much into it. So I've been playing card games for my whole life since like 1995. I started with Magic, so that's like the absolute beginning. If you want to get games in general, I played the NES, Super Mario Brothers NES, like when I was a kid. So just been playing games forever. Top 3 favorite TCGs of all time, with Flesh and Blood and Magic out. Dragoborn. It's a Bushiroad dice-based game. It's awesome, and it no longer exists. WeCross, very, very anime weeb game, but it's actually fantastic. And then the third one, this is tough. It's got to be, let's just say, Middle Earth TCG from the 1990s. And then top 3 other games, that's also difficult. Probably one of the Souls games. I'm a huge Souls games fan. Recently absolutely loved Elden Ring. But if I want to be a hipster, I can say Bloodborne or something. So one of those. And then, oh man, I'm not sure about the other ones. I'll think about the other ones if one of you guys want to go off on this one.
This is like, I'm kind of in the same spot as Kel. This is a tough one. For beginnings into gaming, the earliest memories I have are playing like the N64.
Oh, nice.
Like playing Ocarina of Time and Star Fox 64.
Also a good one.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Very good.
Donkey Kong 64. Like I'm just rolling through all of these N64 games. But yeah, that's how I started. Then for top 3 favorite TCGs of all time, I haven't actually played that many TCGs, if I'm being completely honest. Like
that's fair.
The biggest one, I guess the first one that I ever got like super actually into was Yu-Gi-Oh!
Okay.
Played that for a few years throughout high school and stuff, and that was always fun. That was before like Xyz Monsters came out. I think the last time that I actually like super really played Yu-Gi-Oh! Was just about the end of the Synchro Monsters, which I really enjoyed that. Then like I collected Pokemon cards, and I think that's just about as close outside of Flesh and Blood and Magic. But for top 3 favorite other games, that's a really, really tough one.
It's so hard. I thought of.
I would.
Oh, go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna
No,
say.
you were already answering.
I thought of one more. I think I can put it in there. Arkham Horror Living Card Game. Absolutely love that game. I think it's the best co-op, tabletop game on the market. I absolutely love it. It's one of the games that I play with my partner, and we've played through almost all the campaigns. I literally own everything for that game. So Arkham Horror is probably up there. I don't know about a third one yet. I'll keep thinking. There's so many video games, man. I played so many video games in my life that it's hard to, pin it down to just a couple.
No, it's like kind of impossible.
This question could be an entire episode, couldn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah,
probably.
I played everything from I love Persona 5, but is it in my top 3? Maybe. There's just so many great video games that I played, ranging from fighting games to JRPGs to action games to some shooters. I'm not usually into shooters, but I can probably think of a couple that would fit the list. Like Time Splitters 2 on the GameCube. I mean, there's so much I could say. I played a ton of Neverwinter Nights. I've probably spent the most playing World of Warcraft because I just played that a crap load. I'm gonna lump all what I just said. That's gonna be my third answer. So,
I think I have a solid 2, and then the third one is kind of an up in the air sort of thing. Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
Oh, good one.
Is my favorite Legend of Zelda game in the franchise. Period. It has always been my favorite one and will always be my favorite one.
I love that answer. That game stressed me out as a kid.
It's so weird, but I love
the time limit really stressed me out. I love it, but I think I appreciate it more as an adult now. But yeah.
Yeah, now that you have an idea of how to manage your time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Majora's Mask for sure. These are also in no particular order. Metroid Fusion.
Oh yeah.
For the Game Boy Advance. Easily my favorite Metroid game. I put so many hours into that game. I just love its aesthetics, everything. And I love the Metroid franchise mostly because of how much I love Metroid Fusion specifically.
Is Fusion the one where she's in the blue suit?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I had that one.
She gets infected by an X parasite, and then they do a bunch of surgery on her, and then they end up leaving her with a suit that's called the Fusion suit, and it's her DNA. The suit is part of her in a molecular level, and it bonds with her DNA and basically turns her into an X parasite.
That is some deep lore.
Yeah, I love this game, dude. I absolutely love it. And then for the third, it's action RPGs in general. I played, I don't even know how many hours of Diablo 2.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
It's I loved Diablo 2. I loved Diablo 3 as well.
Some of the secret sauce, Diablo 3 on a PlayStation 4 or 5 or even maybe on Xbox, whatever, couch co-op is so much fun.
Yes,
any couch co-op game is just awesome.
I've seen that, and I'm kind of remiss that I have only played it on PC because I've seen footage from it, and it really does look and it kind of operates as a different game almost. It has a different feel to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For the couch co-op and just controller based everything, it looks really cool, and I'm really interested in it, but. I was also super into Path of Exile for a long time and sort of fell off of it because of some of the new patches and stuff that they were making and buffs and nerfs and stuff. But yeah, I have 1,200 hours in Path of Exile. And I only started playing it a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago.
Nice. You don't want to see how many months I have in. I think it's actually probably measured in years in Warcraft. I mean, World of Warcraft. Yeah.
Yeah. So various action RPGs as they've shown up would be my third answer. But it is now your time. Please, I'm super interested to know.
Yeah, regale us.
I think everything has been mentioned already. But yeah, I think the sort of isometric RPGs like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, Divinity Original Sin 2.
Oh, Divinity. Yeah,
Good stuff.
That's a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah, those games are the ones I really, really like. The ones with loads of story, loads of dialogue options where you can just go either, one way or the other, like Knights of the Old Republic, the Star Wars
Oh
games.
yeah, that's a good one.
When you could go light or dark side, it's just those sort of choices are what I love in games. I think that's inherent as to why I like Flesh and Blood, because you choose a hero, and you can do whatever you want with that hero. And I'm a massive fan of archetypes as well, and RPGs. So yeah, very much like the reasons you guys stated. But yeah, the isometric ones are my favourites. TCGs, yeah, I've always been into Magic. Obviously, we're not talking about that, but one of the ones that I've started playing recently is Final Fantasy, because I'm a massive Final Fantasy fan, and the mechanics are sort of similar, where you discard a card to gain resources. So it's similar in a way where you all of your cards, you don't get mana screw. Like Magic, you get mana screwed, whereas in Final Fantasy, you don't get mana screwed, similar to Flesh and Blood, where your cards can be pitched. So it's quite similar in that way. Played Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot. Me and Kel actually played a Pokemon Gym Leader format recently.
It was pretty fun.
which was quite fun, even though my bug deck was garbage.
Maybe
that Pinsir was getting so much value.
Yeah, that Pinsir did get a lot of value. I played a psychic ghost type deck that ended up being maybe a little too strong. It was pretty good.
Spreading damage everywhere, wasn't it? Damage counters.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm a massive fan of board games as well, like the massive, epic, sprawling dungeon crawl board games, like Gloomhaven. Is a fantastic one if you've got the right play group to play it with. But yeah, like Descent, Journeys in the Dark, those classic ones. But yeah, that sort of stuff. Yeah, with me, it's all epic. It needs to be massive, epic, as much time synced into it as possible.
I'm with you. I'm like. I can enjoy the extremes. I love like the massive, it takes like an hour to set up all the crap. But also, I like Sushi Go, where I can just sit down with like my parents and be like, "You guys want to play Sushi Go?" Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's see. This is a very interesting question. I'm not sure how to answer this one. This is by Tom of Harvest at Doobling Season. Imagine you get the master key to Legend Story Studios and change anything you like, but can only change one thing. What would it be?
I know what my answer is, but they've kind of fixed it already. My main concern, my main detraction from Flesh and Blood as a game, and as I said, they did kind of fix this already, was they had the first edition set and then the unlimited edition set spaced so far apart from each other. And I understand why they didn't want the sales of one to cannibalize the other, but with unlimited being a limited print run, or with first edition being an unlimited print run anyway, and unlimited being, it doesn't have the cold foils and whatever, it made sense to have those two as, this is the one for collectors, this is the one for people who just want the cards to play. I don't know why they didn't release them simultaneously, just so you had people who wanted to play in tournaments, in big tournaments, to play the optimal version of their deck. They would have to shell out money for the cold foil version of the legendaries that they wanted to play, instead of having access to the rainbow foil versions a little bit easier. And that always just sort of stuck with me in a negative way. They did fix it by making it so that there's only one, if I remember correctly, the release said that they were going to do one set with cold foils and rainbow foil versions of cards, of legendaries. That was what they were doing going forward. They're not doing unlimited anymore.
Yep.
So it does fix it, but I think that having a separate unlimited set was still relatively beneficial. I mean, there's an argument to be made either way. But that was the change that I would have made. In fact, I would probably say that's the change I would still make. Have there be a first edition and an unlimited edition, and maybe have the first edition operate more like collector's boosters in Magic. Not exactly one-to-one, because I don't really like that that setup as it is, as like they've actually implemented it. But just having it, maybe it's pared down a little bit for the first edition, where it doesn't have every single card in it that's not actually built for draft. They're priced maybe a little bit more premium, but they do then have the collectible versions of these cards. And then also have the unlimited set, which is, the more accessible version.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
for sure.
Made for draft, etc. So that would probably be my change that I would do.
Mine, it's similar. Mine comes down to distribution, and I don't know how much of a LSS has a hand in this. I mean, I'm sure they're able to change it to some degree, but I would like to get to a point where any LGS that supports Flesh and Blood can order whatever number of product they want and then get that. That's what I want. It seems simple, but it's not the case these days. Even with like Uprising, I've heard specifically in Canada, some stores are getting cut pretty hard on allocation. And I would love for them to just get what they want. And so they can, get the product for their player base. I think that's probably one of the biggest problems that Flesh and Blood has right now. And I think a lot of the current problems and stuff stem from distribution issues. Maybe some stores getting favored over other stores, and a lot of messy stuff here that I don't personally know a lot about. I don't know a lot of the intricacies, but I do know the end result. And I would like the end result to be, if a store wants X number of boxes and they think they can sell it, they should be able to get X number of boxes. Yeah. So that's what I would like.
Yeah, and I've got this is something that's hit me fairly recently, is because the affiliates that I have in the UK are a online store only, and they have now been, there was legislation in place with some sort of EU. I don't know the details, but basically the UK online retailers could still get boxes, even though LSS said that only bricks and mortar stores can really get the sealed product. But there was a sort of a loophole in the UK where they could still get it. But now that is not the case. So my affiliate and the people that I work with can no longer get Flesh and Blood products at all. They're not allowed to have them anymore. And for people that don't have a local game store, or people that don't have access to getting boxes from a local game store, if they don't have access to that, they now can't really get it if the online retailers are being cut out completely. So I think that's sort of onto your point, where if any store wants to support Flesh and Blood in any way, whether that's just selling it or hosting tournaments or doing the armory events and what have you, I think they should be able to get it if they want to have it. I think that's paramount, especially for the online communities that I've built. Because I don't have a game store in my area, and I've built my community based on the online stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that goes on to what you were saying there, is if a store wants to get it, no matter what sort of store they are, they should be able to get it.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that a little bit when I was growing up. I mean, a couple places I lived didn't have LGSs, so I was just kind of like, out of luck,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So let's jump on to the next one. So this one is pretty close to what we talked about before. In fact, I'm just gonna shout out the user. It was David Apodaca at Apodoggy74. He just asked about Ranger. We've talked a lot about Ranger, so we're gonna move on. But just shout out to David, and thank you for asking the question.
Anyway.
Yeah. But the next one is also kind of something we talked about, but I think we can extrapolate a little bit more on it. This is by a user whose name I can't properly pronounce. It's like Chuik at Chuik, Chui. How to help grow your local Flesh and Blood community. Like if there are no players, just a few, or a healthy play group. I'm at the first stage, but have been trying to get my local community to grow and wanted to know stories from other people. So we've talked about this a little bit, but any just like other tips that you guys have on just helping to grow a smaller community, not from like zero, but like once you get a couple, and growing from there.
I think you added some good points, Bill, about being diverse in what you're doing.
I think that's good.
Yeah, making sure that you're not like that's sort of a stage that helps a lot once you actually do have a bit more of an established play group of people. But what, like, just to get started, something that I did actually, I put together just like really budget starter decks for every class that I could think of. It wasn't every single class, but I think it was like 10, maybe 8 or 10 decks that I put together just from bulk that I already had. Doesn't need to be at that much of a scale, but I then sort of donated them to a local game store and was like, hey, if people come in here and they want to play Flesh and Blood, there are these decks that are like put together. They're basically all at the same level. Like some of them were for heroes that didn't have the Blitz decks at least readily available, the pre-constructed ones. So it's like if they're interested, they can play with that. So something that I would do if you're really dead set on getting Flesh and Blood into being a thing, it does require a little bit of legwork. But honestly, if you bought a box or two of a set and just put together basically commoner versions like Blitz decks for the heroes that are in that set, and you make yourself acclimated and aware of how to play the decks and how they function, then you can just start with your friends and say, hey, like there's this game that I really like. You should try it out. Here are the decks. They don't even have to do anything. You just then sit down and you explain how to play the game with them. And if they like that, then, you can start doing more and more in terms of like solid events and stuff. But I would say if you're trying to build something from the ground up, like starting with kitchen table play is step one, like the absolute foundation for starting this up, because then once people really get into it and they start buying product for themselves, or they're looking into how to build decks and they're looking at strategy and stuff, then you can sort of go to, your LGS. If they don't already support Flesh and Blood, you can pitch that to an LGS. They do follow like the customer is always right sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you can talk to them and be like, hey, would you mind either carrying product or starting up events or just having like a free play night set aside where, you can invite people for this and have it be like sit and go pods where people can just hang out and play if they want to. But something that I have seen is you do have to have that basis of there is interest already for an LGS owner to consider it.
Okay.
So having those decks to play, as I said, you do have to do the legwork yourself a little bit in getting the decks together and sort of presenting it to people. But honestly, like this is completely serious. I brought pre-con Blitz decks to Jan's, like Jan from the Spike Feeders, to his bachelor party. And I was like, hey, does anybody want to learn how to play Flesh and Blood?
That's awesome.
And one of the guys there, his name was Steve. He really liked the Katsu deck. And I was like, you know what, man? You can have it.
Yeah.
And there you go. Like,
yeah, man. Like, I brought some like little like Blitz decks to one of the professor's like game nights, and I taught one of the guys there how to play. Actually, if you've watched the professor's most recent gameplay video, I think it's called Shuffle Up and Play. I don't
Shuffle Up and
remember.
Play.
What's his name? George from that taught him how to play Flesh and Blood at a Commander night. So everyone else is playing Commander.
Gary Oak.
Yep, German Gary Oak. Taught him how to play Flesh and Blood. While everyone else is playing Commander. So, yes, just bring decks. I think that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Honestly, a good suggestion too. I've opened up a couple boxes of it. History Pack 1, if you can somehow get your hands on them, if you just open up 2 boxes, you can build like an okay commoner-ish Blitz deck out of every, all 8 classes. There's enough staples in there to do that, and you'll be rocking like some pretty decent cards too. So,
yeah,
and they look really nice.
Yeah.
Unironically, I really like the white border. I think it looks really cool.
And I've also had pretty good luck. I just opened up my second box today, and I'm 2 for 2 on E-Strikes from History Packs. E-Strike and Toma Fiendel, I got one of each in both of them. And then the second box, I got a legendary. Just the Brave Forge Bracers, but still. My luck is good with those. All right. Next question. This is more of a nuts and bolts mechanic-y question, but I think we can talk about this for a little bit. Boardroom Gamer at Boardroom Gamer asks, I would love to see someone talk about to block or not to block, when to do it, and how to know how much to block. I've been searching for that and can't find a resource, pun intended. And I can talk about this just a little bit, just baseline. When I'm playing, I just think about my strategy. And so if I'm playing like, say I'm playing aggro Briar, right? That's a pretty popular, or at least it was a pretty popular one. That strategy doesn't really want to block as much because you want to push back with as much damage as you can. Now, there are some situations where you do want to block if there's like some punishing on hit effects, but basically what I do when I'm playing is I like to plan out my turn on my opponent's turn. And so I need to think, okay, can I still execute my strategy if I block with X cards or equipment, right? And that's kind of like how it boils down at the end of the day. You just kind of need to know what your deck wants to do, and you need to weigh, like, can you still accomplish what you're trying to do with the cards in your hand. So that's my general tips. If you guys have any tips in regards to blocking versus not blocking.
Well, I do have some thoughts, but I did also just talk a bunch about about local meta growth.
Yeah.
So I'll defer to you first if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a numbers game, really, isn't it? So if you're getting hit for 10, you then have to look at your hand. You know, you have to think, right, if I block this, can I then do more damage back? If you're not blocking at all, can you do more damage back than what you've just received? So it's just about adding up numbers and, you know, also on hit effects of what you might do or added value of what you might get from playing cards. You just have to add up all of these sums and what they might equate to, you know, as a numerical value, and then figure out whether it's worth blocking or not. So yeah, there's a lot of equations involved, but if you can effectively get more value out of the damage that you've taken from your crackback, that's when it's, you know, worth considering whether to block or not.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for tempo as well, especially if you're an aggro deck, because cards in hand equate to defense and also equate to offense in Flesh and Blood. So, I mean, if you are an offensive deck and you're blocking a lot, you might not be taking very much damage, but you're also not executing your game plan, and you're not going to have that tempo to actually push the damage that you need to do to win the game.
Exactly.
And if you can apply the pressure, I can speak properly. If you can apply,
you can apply the professor.
Yeah, if you can apply the professor, you can force your opponent to block with the cards that they have, so they'll have a less impactful turn. So it's kind of a give and take. Like I said, just kind of knowing your role in the matchup and in the game. And if your opponent can successfully get you off of your role, then they're doing a great job of executing their game plan. But I'll pass it on to Bill.
Yeah, it's sort of a, like, my thoughts are kind of a mix of what both of you guys have said so far, because that's one of the things that really starts to click once you get reps in when you're playing. Because one of the things when I was first starting to play, I had a hell of a time trying to figure out like what the flow of a turn was supposed to be like for a given deck. Where it sounds super weird, but each individual deck, you have like certain beats that you're trying to hit, like a tempo outside of the card game aspect, where it's like, okay, we're doing this, then this, then this, and like you start to be able to put together the turn like that. So when I started to parse Flesh and Blood turns like that, it made it a lot easier, like Kel said, to plan what I wanted to do on my turn with the cards I was given on my opponent's turn. And you have like your plan A, where if everything goes perfectly and they have an off turn where I don't have to actually care about what they're doing, then I can keep all my stuff and this is the optimal rollout. Then once you start doing that and your opponent starts to present things where it's like, oh, well, I have to block that because it's a crush effect or something, then you can start saying, okay, which of these pieces that I have are the least valuable to my plan? Yeah. So how much of my plan A can I retain while also presenting a defense? And you sort of go down the chain like that, where, it's, oh, I only have to block with one card. Oh, I have to block with two cards. I can block with my equipment here, that sort of thing. So it's not quite as easy, especially with all the different game plans for the different heroes being so diverse and crazy. There's no one thing where it's like, oh, you should block this. You should always block in this situation, because sometimes you have enough to like, I think there was a game I was playing against Jan where I was playing Bravo and I came in with a crippling crush and he didn't block it because he was on Viserai and he had like 20 rune chants and a Sonata arsenaled. So he was just like, yeah, I'll discard my cards and then play the Sonata for 15.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
exactly.
he just won anyway. So it's like, there's never one case where it's always correct to block or it's always correct to not block. It makes it a little bit difficult there, but as long as you're able to, like, as said, sort of break down your options to a value where you can sort of place it onto, this is the best plan, this is the second best plan, then it starts to become a little bit easier to determine when is correct to block.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some like sort of general rules in regards to like when to block with equipment. Like, it's generally better to save your equipment for times where you can get the most value out of it, not just in terms of how much you're blocking with, but also in terms of like, using it against dominate cards or powerful on-hit effects, or saving it for a turn where you can leverage your equipment to keep cards in your hand to have an explosive turn. There's some stuff like that too. It's generally not a good idea to just kind of throw your equipment in front of whatever. It's good to think that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, your equipment blocks are very limited and also very valuable.
Yeah.
But it can be really easy to see it as like, oh, I don't have to get rid of any cards here, when it might just be optimal for you to get rid of some cards.
Yeah.
Especially like on the first turn, where it just lets you basically get a rebuy by drawing at the end of the turn.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're playing like, I don't know, Blitz, and you think you can like really go to town on your first turn, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly fine to basically just mulligan a couple cards at least.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
So this next one is maybe a little bit we talked about too, but this is from Smithel at Smithel Gaming. Apart from the best format ever made, Commoner, what are your recommendations for budget-friendly decks / heroes for people to try to get into in other game modes? Personally, I see this question a lot. So I do like Commoner. I don't know if it's the best format because it's not Ultimate Pit Fight, but yeah, I've answered a lot of these questions. Do either of you guys want to take this one off, or I can just keep rolling?
I don't have a lot to say about it because I do, as I've mentioned before, I think that Commoner is a really great starting point now. But the way that I got a lot of people into the game is just by playing Blitz, which is kind of just Commoner plus. It's Commoner with a little fancy hat on. But yeah, like, I don't know, Blitz sort of has a lot of overlap with stuff, especially now that Ultimate Pit Fight is officially a Blitz format. Or a Blitz constructed style format.
Yeah.
So like, Blitz is probably really strong for that sort of thing. Ultimate Pit Fight may be a little bit stronger, but it requires more people.
That's
because you can play with your more expensive cards and they don't necessarily have to be as cohesive. Doesn't need to be like as tuned of a strategy to still have a good time. But I would say in general, constructing a Blitz style deck would be the best way to start.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, in terms of they ask for decks and heroes, budget friendly. I mean, I honestly think Mechanologist, especially in Blitz, is very budget friendly. Most of the mech cards are pretty cheap, even the Majestics. And it's good, very, very good. I think Aggro Boost Dash is one of the best decks in Blitz. And so if you just want like a really good, pretty easy to pilot deck in Blitz, that's also pretty budget friendly, you can just go Dash. You don't need to buy, in fact, you should not be running like Command and Conquers and Art of Wars and all these kind of expensive generics. You just slam a bunch of commons and a couple majestic mech cards and go to town. I mean, if you really want to go all in, you can buy like a Teklo Foundry Heart that's like not super expensive. You don't even need a tunic. I would recommend Dash as a very good, easy entry point. I would not recommend, despite what you saw at the Pro Tour, Kano. Kano is one of the hardest heroes to play. So I would not recommend Kano as like a starting hero. But yeah, I mean, Dash, Ira, the Warriors are pretty great to learn with, I think. Both Dorinthia and Kasai and Bolton's a little more complicated, but Dorinthia and Kassai are, specifically Dorinthia has always been my go-to to teach people how to play, because it'll really make you learn the reaction step, which I think is very important. It's when I taught people how to play, I always bring a Dorinthia deck, because I'm like, reactions are very important, and it's kind of one of the more rules-intensive parts of the game, and it's imperative that you know this. But yeah, those are my kind of general suggestions on like budget-friendly decks and heroes. Stay away from, well, I mean, I guess Starvo is kind of being rotated out anyway, so don't have to really worry about that. But just regular Bravo, I think, would be great to learn. I think he's pretty easy to play, and he's pretty strong, and the cards aren't super expensive, so regular Bravo is pretty good too, especially like in Blitz.
Yeah. I definitely lost that part of the question just from when I was parsing it.
No, it's okay.
audio style. But now that you mention it, honestly, if we're talking about like a Blitz deck, like Blitz Chain can be built really cheaply.
Yeah, for sure.
And is pretty good. And I would also second Ira specifically. Ira can be unbelievably cheap and very, very powerful.
Yeah, the only thing with Ira is like you're probably going to want to get a mask, but hopefully you can get a cheap like white border mask of momentum or something.
Yeah. Like you can still play it pretty reasonably without it.
Yeah, for sure.
It pushes it into a different tier once you actually do get the mask.
The mask is gross.
Just to get started though, like the amount of pressure that she has just from a straight up attacks per turn perspective, and the amount of damage that she can consistently throw at you is like just fine, like just super solid.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that she's particularly hard to play either. Like
no.
I think it's
each turn is the same.
Yeah, it's
super linear.
It's kind of the same as like boost dash, right? You're just like, I'm gonna boost a bunch, and then maybe sometimes I'll shoot you with my pistol, but I'm just gonna throw a bunch of big boosties at you.
I think obviously Smithle here as well is obviously referring to the commoner format as well, and I think it's Ira is the only one that has a common specialization as well, isn't she?
Yeah. I mean, Ira is one of the best decks in Commoner, in my opinion. Absolutely a powerhouse. And also, I think Bravo, once again, Bravo is very, very good in Commoner because you can just dominate massive attacks every single turn. And Commoner doesn't have a whole lot of defense reactions that are great. Like, you have like your standard ones, unmovables and 0-for-4s, but I think Bravo's a good place to start. Here we have Green Shot X saying, I am aware Uprising is about to come out and the meta will change, but how do you guys personally feel about the current state of the game? Do you love it and would gladly keep playing it as is for a longer period of time, or what could some changes be that you would like to see? So I'll go ahead and answer this one real quick. I actually don't think the meta is too bad. I mean, as much as people like rag on Starvo, like it's fairly diverse, and we saw that at the Pro Tour. I mean, we obviously saw a ton of Starvos, but we saw a very diverse meta. Everything from like we got Levia on feature match. We saw Yuki Lee Bender absolutely crush with Lexi. We saw those Kanos break out. Like when I think about other card games and their metas, there's usually only like a couple top tier decks in like standard formats. And Flesh and Blood has more than that. Like a good consensus was like prior to the recent ban and suspensions, there were like 3 to 4 decks that I think people were considering like top tier decks. And then there's some other like, A tier decks that were decent too. So honestly, in the grand scheme of things for TCGs, I don't think the meta was that bad. However, that being said, Starvo is kind of unfun to play against, and that definitely has a very real downside. And he also kind of pushed out some classes that could have potentially been there. Maybe some of the more aggro centric classes like Katsu or even Dash. So I don't think it's the worst thing ever. Also, I don't think it's my favorite format of all time. So I'm glad for the shakeups. This is kind of like a lame answer, just saying being in the middle. But I mean that's kind of how I feel. Like I don't think it's the worst, but I think it could get better. And I'm glad that Starvo is going to be rotating out, and hopefully we'll see a decent mix of archetypes here going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always a nice story to tell, isn't there? Obviously, Chain was a boogeyman for a while.
Yeah.
Briar was obviously a boogeyman for a while. You know, if there's a deck to beat, that's why the Pro Tour was so interesting, because we saw Kano just come out of nowhere and obviously convert really, really well. So I think the meta is in a good place when it can tell stories like that, because people are actually thinking of how to attack the meta, like Tyler did with Chain with his Prism deck. So. So yeah, these stories are good to tell. So I think in that regard, it's in a good place, because
Yeah.
we do have like the callings and other events for people to play more decks that they want to play rather than decks they should play. So I think in that regard as well, there are events outside of the Pro Tour where people can play the decks they want. So I think it is in a good place with regards to how they've got it set up.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, if you look at the top 8 of the Pro Tour, like, there were, well, let me kind of recount it. We had 2 Kanos, 3 Starvos, a Prism, a Briar, and a Chain, right? So that feels pretty diverse to me. Like, there was a good smattering of heroes in the top 8. Even though, like, there was like 128 Starvos, only 3 of them made it into the top 8, which, shows that there is room for, innovation. Like you said, especially in regards to, like, the Kanos.
It's something that I've sort of thought for a little bit. I think that right now the competitive scene for Flesh and Blood sort of almost has like a self-imposed meta, and that's like a weird sentence, so I'll explain it. Like, we have all of these resources for people to theory craft decks and to talk about, tournament results and all of that. And I think something that is a little bit, that I've seen at least, that's a little bit too easy to get into for these discussions is to sort of blinder down on this is the best deck, this is the most consistent thing, without taking into account how to beat that, and instead tuning this one strategy until it's as best as it could possibly be. And I think the people that will have like maybe the most success are the people who, as we've sort of talked about before, metagame it a little bit.
Yeah. For sure.
But the discussion is so overpowering about, Starvo is the best deck and it's super easy and here's all of this content about this deck specifically, then creates a situation where people will go to these big tournaments and they'll be like, oh, well, this is the best deck. I've read so much about it. I know it like the back of my hand, so I'll play this. Instead of, taking it onto themselves and being like, oh, hey, well, because there's so much Starvo, people aren't going to be playing Arcane Barrier because they don't care. So maybe I'll play Chain so that I can get, a little bit more consistent stuff in there. Maybe I'll play Kano so I can get some more consistent Arcane Barrier or Arcane damage in there. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not a new concept when it comes to card games, but I think calling the meta stale is sort of feeding into that self-imposed meta. And I think it's sort of up to the fact that there isn't a ton of other discourse. Like it's a lot easier to go with the flow than say, I'm going to work on this deck. Like there are so many fewer Mansants than there are anybody else, right? Where it's like, I only play Levia. I love Levia. I have a bunch of success with it because I know the deck. But, it's easier to say, oh, well, this is just objectively a really good deck, so I'll play that instead.
And, I mean, you also have like the pro players who kind of have like insight into it, but they're like keeping it a secret, right? Because they want to come in and they don't want anyone to know that they're going to be rocking Kano and lighting fires,
Exactly, because then people would then be prepared for it. They'd bring in Arcane Barrier just to sort of work around that. But there are very interesting decisions to be made, and I don't think that what we're seeing right now is a stale meta. I think it's people just going with what the popular deck is, which there's nothing bad with that, but it also is sort of a disservice to Flesh and Blood to say, oh, well, this is boring because this is all people are doing.
Yeah, I mean, like, one thing, I mean, this happens in all card games. In fact, I think the funniest part about this is that it reminds me a lot of old World of Warcraft PvP. But at some level, like, I know a lot of folks want every hero to be viable, and that's just not ever gonna happen. Like, I don't want to ruin anyone's dreams here, but like that's like impossible to balance, to make every hero viable. And it's something that people would complain a lot about, like I said, in old World of Warcraft PvP. Just like, it just it can't happen. There's always going to be like a deck that stands out among the others, and it's going to kind of trickle down from there. So yeah, I think that's one of Flesh and Blood's greatest strengths and weaknesses is like how people can be very attached to specific heroes and classes. And if their hero class isn't doing well, then it kind of sucks. But hey, I understand. I'm a ranger player, so I know how that is.
Oh yeah.
I know how that is. But at the same time, you got to recognize it's a card game. These things are going to happen because that's just that's just the nature of the space.
The way they've addressed it as well recently in regards to the fact that they've said that it's not all about competitive play, I think demonstrates that they do have plans for more sort of casual stuff going forward. So
100%.
And I fully believe that that's a space where Flesh and Blood can shine, like really shine. I think that just in general, it's the fact that the rate of play is so fast. That's one of the toughest things I dealt with when I was playing Commander a lot is, and actually one of the reasons that our channel started doing competitive Commander was because we would be playing these casual Commander games and they were really fun, but then you start having these games that last for like 2.5, 3, 4 hours.
Ugh.
And everybody has lost interest. And it's like, that's not fun anymore. Like you feel locked into this game. So it's like, well, if I play more competitive decks, then the games end up being a little bit faster. And that was kind of my only reasoning behind it.
Yeah. I mean, like,
and with Flesh and Blood and Blitz and UPF, like the games are pretty quick and the turn structure is really fast. So I just think it works really nicely.
Yeah.
It lends itself.
100%. Not gonna lie, I don't really play Magic a whole lot these days, but I almost always put in some way to just win the game on the spot in my Commander decks because I really don't want to play like a 3-hour game. Like I always put in, I don't always maximize the tutors or whatever, but I always put in like a 2 or 3 card combo. I'm like, I need something to close this out to finish it off,
Yeah. You need a get me out button. Just an ejection.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. So the next question is by I don't know, some guy named like Jim LePage, something like that.
Oh, he's a weirdo.
At Jim TSF, I don't know, some random guy. No one here knows who that guy is. But he asks, "Hi, long time listener, first time caller," which is great for our pilot episode. Would you like to come to Winnipeg to film a bunch of content and record a bunch of these podcasts in person? I'm going to toss this over to Az, who actually responded to this comment.
The answer is definitely yes at some point next year. If we can organise it, then that is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. What Az said, I would definitely be on board for that at some point.
Both of you guys responded to it and said that there's something you're interested in. I don't know if I can swing going to Winnipeg. It's just not a place that I'm super comfortable.
It's kind of far for you, right?
But, yeah. Especially the studio from here. It's like a 8-minute walk or something. Like that's just too much for me.
That is 7 minutes too long.
Exactly. We were talking about this before, like me and Jim, we were discussing, the fact that we were starting up this podcast, and I was like, yeah, there's just going to be a lot of opportunities to chat with these guys. And he's like, yeah, no, if you guys, if you want to have them out here and film in our studio and just hang out and do whatever, like we've done it for other people. So, it's something that the Spike Feeders as a whole, we would be very interested in having you guys over here. So it's cool that you're into it.
Yeah. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Yeah. And then the final question for this very long inaugural episode is by Lighert at Lighert1. How to tackle the FAB is too expensive argument that people not having a clue about the game like to use so much, other than with the counter argument, modern is expensive too, which is they're referring to Magic the Gathering, the modern format, which is pretty expensive. Because there's plenty of benefits in the Flesh and Blood model of expensive cards for the casual player, I feel are ignored. And I know that I think both you guys were talking about this a little bit earlier, right? Talking about it being quote too expensive. Would either of you like to jump in on this question?
Yeah. I have sort of taken it upon myself as like a personal mission to try to fight this argument as much as possible, because while it is, you see a lot of the people, especially in local metas that are really established, like I was talking about before, if you only have blitz events, people are going to they're going to be like, oh, I really like this deck and it wins, so I'm going to put more money into it, because that's just how hobbies work. You like something and you just start spending more money on it. You can get to a point where your local meta is just built of decks where people are doing the optimal thing. They have all the most expensive cards for that deck, and it just sort of like, it's almost like an echo chamber. It's hard to escape that. And then you look at the coverage for high level events like the Pro Tour, and you see everybody's running Arcanite Skullcap and Tunic, and it can make you feel really like unwelcome. Like the barrier is just too high for you to justify it when you're looking at this deck and you're like, oh, this is a good deck, but it costs $600 because it has all the expensive equipment and stuff. The thing that really allows me to not necessarily like rebuff that argument, because it's always going to be difficult. There's always going to be people that, for one reason or another, that maybe they do think it's too expensive. Maybe they just don't like the game as a whole, so they use that as their excuse for not playing it. Which I have experienced people that do that, and it's not a good faith argument, which kind of hurts. But like Commoner is, and I've said this before, it's a really good format, and Flesh and Blood as just a game in general is one of the only games that I've seen or experienced where the commons and rares are legitimately good cards.
Oh yeah.
Like you look at Sink Below, you look at Fate Foreseen, they're commons. They are like the lowest rarity card that you can get, and they are invaluable. They are so unbelievably strong. And then there's cards like Snatch. There's cards like Plunder Run, which was so powerful that it was banned. There's like Seeds of Agony, which is a common that was banned because it's so good.
There's a lot of common cards that were banned, actually.
Yeah. And there's Scar for a Scar, which is just a really good aggro card, and it's a common. Like, there are powerful Majestics, and legendaries do, like, they either enhance your game plan with something like New Horizons, or they're just best in slot for that sort of thing, like Grasp of the Arknight or Carrion Husk or something like that. But unless you're playing at the very, very top level, you can get away with bringing a commoner deck. As long as it's like a well put together commoner deck, you can bring a commoner deck to a Blitz event, and if you know what you're doing, you can probably like do really well.
Yeah, it comes down to the pilot of the deck as well, doesn't it? How much experience you've had playing it, and what your experience is like against the matchup that you're playing as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
I would also like to extend that to like a lot of Majestics, like 90+% of them are actually not that expensive too. Like you can get them for like a couple bucks to maybe $10 for most of them, and then the outliers are going to be like your Enlightened Strikes and Command and Conquerors, of which you're not going to run in every deck anyway. And so you can have like a almost 100% tuned deck for like not too much, like less than $100, I would say, depending on the class that you're playing. And so like I agree. It's just the notion that I think it might stem from a lot of people just coming in from outside the TCG community too, where they're just like, oh, this looks really expensive. Because I do know that there's a good chunk of Flesh and Blood players who this is like their first card game, like this is their first TCG, and yeah, I mean like TCGs are just kind of an expensive hobby in general, and that's just kind of I hate to say it like just like this, but I mean it's kind of how it is. Like, and Flesh and Blood is like not any more expensive than any other like popular card game out there, to be completely honest. And oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I have, as I said, like, I don't want to make a straw man argument here at all, but I have personally seen discussions between people like on our Discord and on Twitter and stuff where people just like they load up TCG Player and they see that Spring Tunic is, at one point it was like $200, and it's like, who would want to spend that on a single card? And the argument there is like, yeah, it's an expensive card, but also it's a generic, so you only need one copy of it ever, and it goes in every deck that you want to play it in.
And
so you can kind of spread out the cost that way if you really want to justify it, but also you just don't need to buy it. Like like it's a good card. Arcanite Skullcap is a good card because it gives you basically +3 health for free.
Yeah.
But I've been very vocal that Arcanite Skullcap is like kind of a bad card.
It's just boring. It's really boring.
Yeah, it's just that hats like just don't exist for some classes, and that's the best option. So
yeah, I mean, like, and exactly what you said, you only need one copy of any given legendary, and also Flesh and Blood doesn't rotate, so
yeah,
you can just have that card and just have it forever. And like, I mean, there's something to be said for like, if you do find your favorite class, your favorite hero, your favorite deck, you could just have that deck. Like, this is not a game where you have to buy into every single set. I mean, even though I'm crazy and I buy like a crap load of every single set because I want to have a play set of everything, you don't have to. You can just be like the brute players, like Mansant, like, you know, the Levia diehards, where you literally only just, you have your Levia deck, and then maybe when a new set comes out, you just buy the singles for the brute stuff and then ignore everything else. And so you have your upfront cost. Maybe if you want to buy everything all at once, maybe you don't even buy everything all at once. You can kind of like, you know, buy it, you know, piecemeal. But you know, you don't have to have everything all the time. And once you have your deck, it's going to be very low cost to just maintain it, and it will never rotate. So, yeah.
And it's about what you want to get out of the game as well. If you want to get, you know, if you want to get into it competitively, then you do have to look at the cards that are obviously very, very good and expensive for a reason. But if you just want to, you know, you have to think about what you want to get from the game, I think, and you know, that's it really.
Yeah, I think especially like as you like you said, it is about what you want to get out of the game. If you just want to play this as like a game where you invite people over, like you want to treat it like Commander or something, you invite people over for a couple beers, just play some Flesh and Blood, because it is just objectively a fun game. There is absolutely zero reason that you or any of the people coming to these sorts of nights need to own a Command and Conquer.
Yeah, no. I mean, like Flesh and Blood can also be played sealed and draft too. Yeah, like you just invite some friends over, draft Welcome to Rathe, or you know, whatever the newest set is, Uprising, draft Uprising, and you just do that too. Like, it's draft basically
is, like, really solid in this game too. Like, it's a lot, for me, it's a lot easier to pick up than it was when I played Magic. Magic so Draft, fun. I always felt like I was lost constantly, but
it's a ton of fun. So I agree. Basically, what Az said, it's kind of what you make out of it, and you know, if you want to be the top tier competitive player, going to the Pro Tour and trying to push for it. Yeah, I mean, you're going to need to fork out the money to have the most optimal deck, but you don't need to start off like that at all. Like, you can just make your $100 deck and then buy, you know, whatever you need, trade whatever you need as you go.
Yeah. Exactly. Also, just as a cap off thing, if somebody really doesn't want to play Flesh and Blood and they have this preconceived notion, and you try to, you know, comfortably nudge them in the right direction by saying, actually, it's not that expensive, and they still don't want to play it, that's fine too. Like, you don't have to play this game. It's not mandatory.
Not everyone has to play everything. Like, I mean, I play, like, currently I like mainline, and by that I mean I buy a crap load of every new set, 2 games. Just play what you like. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of really good stuff. So you don't have to play Flesh and Blood, even though it's, you know, my favorite game. Doesn't have to be your favorite game.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game, but if you don't want to play it, then that's fine. And if somebody that you know doesn't want to play it, that's fine too.
But if I can convince you to give it a shot, then I think I've done my job. If you just go pick up a Ira deck or some Blitz decks and you give it a shot and play it, that's my goal. Most people will take that and be like, this game's awesome, and then they will continue to play it. I've actually had very few people who've actually played it be like, nah, it's not for me. Like, I can't think of a single like local person, like a real life person, you know, outside of the internet, who I've had the experience of like getting like playing the game with them, and it's always been like, oh, this is a ton of fun. And I'm like, yeah, it is a ton of fun.
Yeah, you're right.
So interactive, isn't it? So interactive. All your cards actually do different things. You know, every card is like a modal card. So I can see anyone can have fun with it at any level, really. Yeah,
I don't want to talk too much because we've already gone on for a couple hours, but one of my favorite parts about the mechanics of Flesh and Blood is that it's kind of the opposite of Hearthstone. So Hearthstone is a game where you just play out your cards on your turn, and your opponent can just literally AFK and do nothing. That doesn't matter what they do, right? They have no input on your turn. Flesh and Blood's the opposite. Like, you have 100% input on both turns because you need to determine what you're going to be blocking with, what you're going to be, saving for the next turn. Like, you always have that interaction, like Az said. And that's what I love about Flesh and Blood. There's never an off turn. You can never just kind of like pick up your phone and start like, playing Flappy Bird or whatever. Like, you just can't do it in Flesh and Blood. You have to kind of be paying attention all the time. And that's one of my favorite things about the game. It's super interactive like that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's going to wrap it up for our almost 3-hour pilot episode. Let me take a look at the time. Almost 3 hours. Typically, we're going to have something called the Arsenal, where one of us will talk about something that we're into outside of Flesh and Blood. Doesn't have to be game related, just something that we're really passionate about. But because we have this 3-hour episode, I think we will save that for the next episode, officially episode 1, if this is like the pilot. But I want to say a huge thank you to Az and Bill for joining me for this first episode, and to all of the folks who stuck around these 3 hours and are still listening to us talk. That is crazy and very much appreciated.
Yeah, exactly. There was people ask questions as well. Thank you for asking questions. I mean, I don't know how the structure is going to be going forward, but we're going to try and get maybe 1 or 2 community questions on each week, maybe. But yeah, it's just great to have so much interaction with everybody as well. It's made for a really good sort of icebreaker.
Yeah, I think so too. I think general structure, at least this is the way I envision it, but things can change, is that we'll have like a couple main topics and then some community questions and then like the Arsenal step. I think that's a good layout, schematic. Please let us know what you think about that in the comments of the video, or just message us directly. Speaking of which, where can the viewers find you lovely gentlemen? Let's start with Az.
Cool, yeah. So on Twitter, Go Again Gaming AZ, and on YouTube, Go Again Gaming. I'd appreciate you following me on YouTube. Still very, very small on there, but doing lots of little projects with these guys as well, actually. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on that. But yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, let's get Az to 1K. Az to 1K.
Let's do it.
Make it happen. Let's get Az so we can monetize his content. Let's do it.
My Jack. Yeah, lovely old job.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome. Az puts in a ton of work, and it's very obvious with every single video he puts out. So let's get some people in the Go Again Gaming crew.
Yeah, 100%.
Go Again Gaming. I am Bill from the Spike Feeders. Obviously, we have our main channel, which is more Magic the Gathering focused, which is just the Spike Feeders on YouTube and Twitter. We also have an offshoot channel for Flesh and Blood, the Spike Feeders FAB, which again can be found on YouTube, not on Twitter. We just have the main one for that. And then myself, you can find me at BillTSF. And I tweet about lots of stuff, not necessarily even games, and sometimes not at all, but that's where you can find me.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm Kel, also known as Red Zone Rogue. You can find me at Red Zone Rogue everywhere. YouTube, Twitter. Mostly Twitter is my social media space, but I also have a Facebook at Red Zone Rogue and Instagram at Red Zone Rogue that I occasionally use. But if you want me to respond, it's going to be either YouTube or Twitter. Twitter's probably the best place, but yeah, I've been the host for today. I will not always be the host. We might swap things up. So who knows if Bill or Az is going to be the host of the next episode. And thank you all so much for watching. I think this was really fun. And thank you guys for joining me for this. I'm really excited. I'm excited for the future of the Living Legends podcast. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think we have a ton of potential. We are.
Yes.
And we're all alive at the moment anyway.
Yeah, knock on wood, but yeah.
Yeah. I'll knock
One
on
of us
some wood.
gets oaken olded.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. Starbo's out of
Yeah.
the mix. I guess Oldham can always Oaken hold you.
Yeah.
But
I have heard
have
that
Dominate
if
and go
you, I have heard that if you die to a guardian, you die in real life. So
Oh no. Oh no. I might
Yeah.
guys, I might already be dead.
oh no,
I
oh
need to
no.
go I need to go check.
Are you okay?
I don't know, guys. All right. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, guys.
Peace.